This is why I don't depend on this thing. Okay, it is just after 6:30. We'll call the special meeting of the East Bay Township Board to order. It is Thursday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. If you will join me with starting the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Sue, you want to do a roll call?
Certainly. Lyle?
Yes.
Walters?
Present.
Cook?
Here.
M. Cortade?
Here.
S. Cortade here. Friend?
Here.
And Bartlett is excused.
Okay, with that, it is a special meeting, so, and we do not have all board members here, so we won't be able to add anything to the agenda. But you can see the agenda before us has a Metro engine purchase, the 2023 draft budget, an ARPA update. Is there any conflict of interest with any agenda items for anyone? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Or,
Okay, motion by Cook, support by Lyle. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, with that, we'll move on to public comment. We don't really have much for many people of the public here, although some may be watching. They can always email us. Do either of you guys want to make public comment? Okay, then we'll move on. With that, the first agenda item in front of us is a Metro engine purchase, and we do have Chief Pat Parker here to walk us through this. Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on first. It could have been brutal, but I would have stayed. So what is usual and customary is that when the Metro Board purchases a vehicle and it needs to be financed, is we have to come before all of the townships because we're asking you to pay for this truck beyond the current budget. So as everything in post-COVID right now, the supply chain has got everything upside down. And it's the same way with fire trucks. Right now, a fire truck is out anywhere from 18 to 32 months. So we need a fire truck in 18 to 24 months. And so we came to the board on Tuesday. They approved the purchase of a fire truck for $737,880. This is an increase of apples to apples change of about $162,000 from the last truck we bought in 2020, just to show you what's going on. I don't anticipate prices coming down. I haven't seen anything like this, and nor have the truck manufacturers seen anything like this. So we're not asking for any financing today. We'll be doing that in 2024. But in order to secure the truck, we have to also be able to secure the financing. So coming to you, asking for a resolution approving the financing when it happens. In 2024, we are budgeting a new fire truck, and in 2024, the payment for engine 11 drops off. So we'll trade one new payment for the old one, and of course, it's going to be a little bigger, and we will definitely put it in the budget. So I had sent a sample resolution to you all that we've used in the past, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, or ask that you would pass the resolution.
Awesome, thank you. Appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions on the information that's in their packet or for the chief?
So there's no down payment, nothing due until you take delivery?
No. If you put a down payment down, it'll lower the price of the truck, but, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 18 months to 24 months, so, no, just our word.
We've seen similar things, I mean, not as much as a fire engine, but in some other agencies, like with the DPW, with the truck purchase. We had this with a truck, like a passenger truck earlier in the year.
So this will be moving a 2007 truck to reserve, and we would be selling a 1993 truck. That's, when it's time to do that, will be a 32-year-old truck. Mr. White told me on the farm, we run trucks past 30 years. I said, well, I agree with you, Doug, but fire trucks, no. You know, right, Matt?
I was just trying to look and see what the resolution number was. Did you happen to take a look, Beth?
No,
It'd be whatever the street lights,
are the website,
that's where I'm at, but I don't remember if those got into the packet or if they were late.
And it's too bad right now that we aren't going to finance this truck today because Tony Anderson at Cherry Line Electric has 0% money available right now through the,
That's
Rural
holding
electric.
to it.
yeah, so, and he might, we've done 3 trucks with Tony, 0% interest, that's my kind of money. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But he's gonna stay on as a consultant, so,
That's awesome.
yeah.
this is really, so I'm just looking online.
And
The resolutions.
aren't on there.
No, I'm just looking under the resolution section, but we go 8, 9, 16, 17, 18, 19, 27.
27?
Mhm.
27?
I think that was for the 2019, 27, when you, for the stormwater variance.
It does say stormwater on it.
Yeah.
I was thinking 21 would be the next one, but I don't know if there would be a gap. I didn't have the time to look.
Then there is,
The lights were
like 17, 18, 19, and then there was one in
the par plan.
Yeah, that one.
did you say there are the minutes on? Oh, no, okay.
No.
Oh, you know what? Wait, just look for the email from
Oh, from,
Ann.
yeah, I just didn't want to miss it and have the wrong resolution.
Pat, where's this truck made?
made in Appleton by Pierce Manufacturing.
Okay.
So the reason we stick with Pierce is we'd like all of our trucks to be the same. Same dealer, same location of pumps and doors, and we've had good luck doing that, the last 3 trucks. So we'd like to standardize over all 5 of our stations.
Okay.
And you can see, if we wait till after November, the price goes up almost $48,000. It's kind of like, I don't think they're sticking a gun to our head, but that's when their pricing came out in the middle of October and said, we're taking a price increase November 1. And they're seeing that
21.
on their end as
Sure.
well.
21's the next. Sorry, Pat.
It's okay.
So this would be Resolution 2022-21.
Like you said, there's no real commitment, so if something were to change in the economy in 24 months, it could be less potentially?
I mean, absolutely, potentially, but I doubt it.
And you wouldn't be locked
There's-
into that in
No,
that
and
case?
part of the problem is there's so much ARPA money
Yeah.
available that right now people are just, there's some communities buying a ladder truck and 2 engines right now, sight unseen. So we've had good luck buying stock trucks. These are trucks that they stick to fill slots on the line, they're gone.
And that money's gonna be in the system through 2026, at
Oh.
least, because that's when they have to spend the ARPA money.
And I know the board asked, can this truck wait till that? And we really need a truck. The 2009 is an American LaFrance that went out of business, so we can't even get parts for it. So we're at this point, do we get rid of the 2007 and keep the 94? Because the 94, we're having good luck with.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
There's some wood right over there.
Yeah,
Yes.
now when you give them a purchase order.
Right.
Are we financially locked in? Or is there a down payment that we would lose if we pull out?
No.
How long can we go before we're locked in? Can we go 2 years?
I doubt it. Before we have to make a payment?
No, before you have to commit to buying it. Or you commit to buying it when you turn in?
Yeah, we committed to buy it when we turn in the purchase.
Okay, so there is no backing out?
No, but
Okay.
there's such a demand right now that if we did, they'd find a hole for it.
So I will make the motion to approve Resolution 2022-21, a resolution approving the financing for the fire truck purchase.
Is there support? A motion is made and supported. Let's see.
That's Cortade.
Cortade. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
That's Cortade, I say yes. Cortade?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Walters?
Yes.
Lyle?
No,
No.
no.
Friend?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1.
Okay, thank you for being here
Thank
tonight.
you very much. Appreciate that. And Sue, we're ready for you for elections.
I have been talking to Stacy and Mary. I think we're in good shape. Thank you. We do appreciate you letting us visit her there.
Okay, we'll move on to fiscal year 2023 draft budget. So a couple of things, let's see. You have before you what was sent to you, which is the BSNA printout with the notes for the General Fund 101. We also have with that a draft version of the wage resolution. And with that, you can see I included last year's, so just so you could see, although you can see the changes from last year to this year. I also included a sheet on the mid-year wage adjustments, so you'd recall what those were. And then also a draft fee resolution as well. That's included with that. And And so, and then on your desk, what you have is you have a sheet that'll just give you some historical reference. It'll give you the past 4 years. Note that the balance on that sheet for the 2022 year only goes through September 30th of this year. But at the end of each department, you'll see there's a total in blue there under each department. And that's what the expected end-of-the-year balance will be for each of those, so that you can kind of see historically, then you have almost 5 years' worth of data there. You also have on your desk, just some background, you can take a look at it later, what the revenue sharing amounts were that are printed out from the state. And you'll see we get 6 payments a year. And those are given to us in their fiscal year, which is not the same as our fiscal year. But at the top, I've just noted which payments go into our fiscal year. And you can see last year on the second page, there was a bump by a considerable amount, by about 50%, in that April 2022 year payment. And that was for a census adjustment. When they took a look at the census information, adjusted their financials with the revenue sharing with that. And so that's the information that we use to take a look at what the anticipated revenue sharing is. The last conference they had where they estimated it was in May, and the next one will be in January. And so they update those numbers when they meet. The next thing that was on your desk there was just 3 things that are in the General Fund 101. I just have them here for reference for you. And that's some costs from Raymond. And we can get into that as we go through the budget. Also, proposal from BSNA. And that will go through when it's in the budget. The BSNA, obviously I'm sure you can figure, the Raymond proposal has to do with, further years of service for auditing. The BSNA proposal that we'll discuss about later is, right now, we're on a .NET system with them, so it's on our systems. They have a transition to a cloud-based system, and two of their staff people came up, I think it's been about, 2 or 3 months ago? Yeah, and gave us a demo of the cloud-based system, which was very good, very, very good. And so we're looking at that for 2023. And then the last one is, this has been quite a while. It was in early this year, I think, maybe even in March, when IT Right was up, and he had told me, he said, you're going to need to upgrade that server. And I said, oh, do I need to do that in this year's budget? And he said, actually, you're fine. He said, let me get you some numbers so you can plan ahead with that. So that's that proposal that he gave us, and that's in that General Fund 101, and we'll discuss that too. But just had those there for your
So there's no date on this?
reference.
Was this back in March or is this recent?
Yeah, and I told him, give me a number that'll be good through 2023. Yep. Okay. So with that, I'd like to start to take a look at the general fund and the 101. I do have one other thing I wanted to share with you, just to remind you what you'll be looking at that'll come to you in November. I'm going to just take one and pass it down. And this is the format of the resolution for the General Appropriations Act. This is what we've done this is what we've always done, obviously, but this is the format that we've used, I think, for the past 2 years. If you remember, I think at one point we just changed a little bit for that adoption by cost center for $1,000 within certain line items, because it used to say you couldn't change anything out of personnel or capital, which became cumbersome if your capital was $1 over or your personnel was $1 over. So we included that verbiage there. So I just wanted you to see the format that this will come to you. And on that second page there, that term that I'm mentioning is Section 8. And we're not proposing any changes to that, leaving it the same as it was for the past several years. And then you'll see that 5 and 7 will outline the funds that we have to, by statute, provide the budgets for. And then it goes down into greater detail in the attachments where you have to outline the revenues and then the funds, the expenses by department within those. So just wanted to remind you that all of that information in the BSNA will end up in exactly this format when it's finalized, those numbers. Let's see. With that, let me just give you a little bit of a precursor on some of the things in here that you'll see as we go through the budget, and we can discuss them as we get through those departments in a little bit more detail. But it's pretty busy. We've been working on a lot of initiatives, as you know, because they've all been mentioned at board meetings. So for example, probably one you didn't hear about though was the BSNA Cloud. But you have heard about the personnel manual and a capital improvement plan, which is required by the RRC program that we're going through. The BSNA Cloud, the server replacement I just mentioned. We have 2 road special assessment districts coming up in 2023. So one is Timber Hill that you're familiar with. Another one that's been brought to us through administration that we signed and paid the $1,000 on, but you haven't heard of yet at the board because we've been waiting to get the costs from the road commission and then movement from the citizens to see if they wanted to move forward on it. But it looks as though they do. It's a Holiday Woods subdivision for an overlay. So there's 2 road SADs slated for 2023. That second one also looks like it'll end up falling in the 2023 year. We've got the zoning ordinance rewrite going on. We're proposing a ordinary high water mark delineation for the Forest Lakes Overlay District that will help make that administration more accurate. Trails engineering for both 3 Mile and Safe Routes to School. Traverse Connect has reached out to us about some economic development strategy that we'll talk about further. There's obviously park initiatives and projects. And then we have regular continuing relationships, Leah and the Boardman River Project and the fireworks that are in the budget too. So with that, I think I'd just like to go through the 101 budget, but I do have Claire here as well. So Claire, don't know your timing with your schedule today. If you want to go first, or if we'll hit your department when we get to it, or where are you thinking?
Whatever I would go first, but I'm happy to wait, whatever you.
Okay, how about if we get a chance to go through the revenues, and then when we hit the expenditures, we'll do your department first? Okay, perfect. So you'll see on the first page, the revenues for the 101, pretty standard and traditional. The notes will tell you the detail behind it. So for example, in the current property taxes, our rolled back millage is 0.6871, and you saw that on the L4029 in September. We do add a multiplier on that of 1.01 just because over time of the years, we've seen what we've anticipated would collect by the taxable value times the millage usually ends up just a little higher through the next year. So that ends up being just about 1% or so. So that ends up equating up to that $485,000 that you'll see in the budgeted amount. And obviously you can tell our projected activity is equal to our activity through the end of October. So we've collected, obviously, as you know, all of our property taxes for the year. We have standard revenue of the smaller revenues. I'll just go through those pretty quickly. The swampland tax, the mobile home tax, and I will note that mobile home tax does not include, it includes Timber Ridge and Wood Creek. It does not include anything for Alta Vista yet because they're not quite there. Let's see, licenses and permits. And those have been, as you can see, relatively strong this year, more than we anticipated. And then we go on to the SEPTA advance repayment is scheduled in. Don't believe, my understanding is that they'll need to negate that for this year, like they had asked several years ago, so those payments are factored in. Passport fees have been regular, nice bonus adjustment to our revenues in the past several years. You can see that in 2021, that took a hit. Actually, you can see it better if you look in the history sheet. But you can see in years 2020 and 2021, they really took a hit with down to $7,000 and $9,000. And those have rebounded up nicely post-COVID. The summer tax collection payment is pretty steady and easy to calculate from the school district. Earned interest is something we obviously never know and has historically taken big swings for local units of government. Obviously, there are many times when that's been a very, very small line item with just a couple $1,000s in it, and it's obviously swung the other way right now. So we're kind of taking a middle approach with that, not expecting that rates are going to come down too much in the 2023 year. The septage interest, that's related to the advance repayment. The Metro Act revenue, which is relatively consistent. And we have the other revenues and donations. This is bumped up quite a bit, but you can see the reason for that in the line item detail, which, if you'll recall, the agreement that we entered into with TART for the 3-mile trail engineering, the contract was for $158,000, and the agreement with TART is that they pay the $158,000, that they have both federal and a private contributor for those funds. And right now, my understanding is those funds from them, from TART, are from the private contributor right now, and that's important for us to know because we need to take into account if there's any sub-recipient issues or audit issues for us related to federal funds. But right now, those are not part of that right now. So that's good to know. But that's why the 692 line item is bumped up there. I'll swing back real quickly to the state revenue sharing, and that was the handout that I showed you over here. I believe, looking at historically, that this number that is in the requested budget is low, and I think we'll probably be about another $80,000 to $100,000 over that easily. However, when I go by what the state puts out in their revenue forecasting conference, I struggle to come up with more than what we've included in the requested budget. And then the cable franchise agreement, and that hasn't seen a lot of huge growth. As a matter of fact, it's kind of been limited, and I think in some of the notes in previous years, we've seen even a decrease. So we've just kept that at a pretty modest amount there with what we're seeing from this year.
Hey, Beth,
Yeah.
going back to the state revenue sharing in the 2022 original and amended budgets, both of them, were $360,000 less than what we actually are projecting for this year.
So
Reading that.
more than, you mean what we've collected to date?
Well, the projected activity is $300,000, $360,000 more than what was
Amended the budget.
amended budget. Is that similar in the calculation that you did for the 2023 budget?
Yep, I go through the same thing. But remember, do you remember me showing you that there was that bump in the payment of 100,000? Yep.
Not consensus.
Census. Census adjustment, yep, that factors into that. And we always have that, like I said, with that 1.3 that we're requesting for next year to show, our books to show, I feel pretty confident we'll see that at closer to 1.4. But, you know, going by those numbers. And so the same thing last year, at 1 million, I probably felt like we were going to be closer to 1.1 or 1.2. And then obviously with that additional buffered payment, that makes the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, any questions on the revenue? Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on to the expenditure side. And Claire, I think we'll go ahead and take off then with Department 410. And Claire will have some of those departments, some of those projects that I mentioned to you at the very beginning will be under Claire's purview in either 410 or one of the other related items near it. Okay, go ahead, Claire. You know, if it's okay, let me just cover one thing first, because this is the first expenditure section we've gone on to. In that wage information, I looked at, we have a policy. I don't have the policy verbiage right here for you. I didn't pull it to bring tonight, but it's basically, we've gone by COLA. And in looking at, I know last year we mirrored the Social Security adjustment, 5.9%. And so this year I looked at online at what some of the news reports were and agency reports at what they expected, which was more like 9%. So in planning, I've put in 9%. That's obviously a point of discussion we can come to when we take a look at the wages resolution and that wage table. But that's what will be reflected right now in these line items unless we adjust it otherwise.
And that's what you entered in for the emergency services as well, that we adopted in September.
So when Nick and I did that budget, we just added in a buffer that would accommodate that. And he's been taking a look at that this past week, because I said, let me know, where that's going to fall with next year's budget, because you guys have already seen those numbers. And that's when this gets filled out, the General Appropriations Act for Emergency Services, those exact numbers will go into that, that you've seen before and that the millage is based on. But yes, we will confirm that, but when I talked with him, we met earlier this week, he said he was going to go through it. He said, no news is good news, and I'll throw up a flag if I'm seeing anything, so. Yeah, so I just wanted to let them know that, and we can always talk about that later as a board.
Okay, that sounds good. You'll see the first line item, intern. We're not budgeting for an intern this year. And that's just because we don't have a specific project in mind. There's a possibility that, next summer, if there is a project that's appropriate, we may come back for a budget adjustment, but for right now, we're not planning for an intern. We've got planning and zoning office specialist, planner wage, legal expense attorney. We are budgeting $15,000 this year, which is pretty consistent with where we were this past year. Hoping that we're kind of moving away from some of our more contentious stuff that's relying more heavily on on our legal counsel, but we're anticipating similar expenses to 2022. The next one is the $20,000 for contract services. So that is separate from the zoning ordinance, is a separate line item. So for contract services for planning and zoning, We're looking for some additional assistance for planning review if necessary, as well as some grant writing. So one example of a grant that we're looking for is pursuing the Coastal Zone Management Program to get some funding for the US 31 corridor. We've put in a few grants, have not been successful, but those are the types of grants that we're looking at, continuing to pursue for Planning and Zoning Department. Engineer, the $2,000, that is,
So I moved I did want to mention
Yeah, I
this
saw
to you
that you
before,
moved that.
you moved that, okay.
that sounds good. So the engineer, as you know, most of what Wade Trim is doing is through escrow, so the 2,000 is just as needed. I think one example is we had them do some surveying of the ordinary high water mark with the Lakemore development, so it's some additional services that the township can't necessarily put into an escrow, but the vast majority will be coming out of escrow.
Just in particular for people who might be watching the meeting, could you maybe expound a little bit about how the engineer's fees are paid through applications and developments in escrow?
Yeah, so any type of review that the engineers do, stormwater permit, water and sewer, preliminary engineering review related to roads, snow storage, those types of things, all are paid for by the applicant through an escrow that's deposited with the township, whether that's multifamily, commercial, industrial.
So the engineer, as you guys know, is on our behalf and looking out for the township's behalf. We contract them, we pay them, but we get the funds through the developers.
So you'll see, I think, looks like for 2022, we're at about $400 for engineering fees that's actually coming out of the township's expenses. The next line item, stormwater expenses, that's all been rolled into escrow, so that's why you'll see that's blank. Moving down to the 410-806, education. We've got that at 3,000, planning to attend the MAP conference in 2023. We're also looking at BSNA training for, as well as possibly Intergov, but some additional technical assistance training for some of our permitting systems and software, just to make sure that we're maximizing the use of that. The next one, association dues, MAP and the American Association of Planning, I think, is the bulk of that. I think that's all that we were paying for last time, or for 2022. Mileage, travel, lodging, and meals. You'll see that we're budgeting about what we did from 2022. You'll see the actual activity in '22 was significantly lower. That was due to not very little travel this year. Most of it was associated with COVID, but also being on maternity leave. And I didn't do much traveling this year, but I am planning to attend some more conferences and some more professional development in 2023.
I would also say the workload has prohibited some of that too, just been very busy.
That's probably true, yeah. It's hard to get out of the office. Let's see. Going down, payroll expenses, printing and publishing, that's $1,000. Anticipating printing copies of the master plan for all of the boards and commissions, as well as that's what we use for ZBA when we're, most of the site plan reviews and public hearings are covered under escrow, but the ZBA are not, so those come from, for the zoning board of appeals, public hearing notices.
Oh, question, do you think you're gonna have less expense next year on publishing? Because we're already over for,
Right, we're at 1,100.
yeah.
It's a good point. We might want to bump that up a little bit.
Okay, just asking.
Yeah, thank you.
And one of the things when I take a look at that, that is a good point, but with the marginal difference that it is, I'll usually see that we can adjust that from another line item, like we've got a good buffer that'll cover that marginal amount. But we will never complain if you want to add a little bit more in there.
Cell phones, we're looking at that consistent with 2022, and then capital outlay.
And that's not really capital, that's more supplies specific to planning and zoning. And we'll move that to supplies with the chart of accounts implementation. So at $1,000, that's nothing that's going to be, yeah, it's not going to be over 5,000 and longer than a year in usage. I mean, it has to be both of those or should be for capital. So we'll move that to supplies, and that'll be something like if they need a monitor. Obviously, general office supplies like the paper we're printing on, pens, pencils, sticky notes, those are all in the general that we do through the general 265 department. And these are more specific things that they need, that they might need in the field with PT or computer-wise, something like that.
Any questions or comments on that
I just
section?
have a couple, I don't know that they matter, but for contract services, the to-date number is larger than the projected.
That probably, I put this number in and then re-pulled the report, so,
That's the
yeah,
same with printing and publishing.
yeah,
It's not a lot, but
yeah. Yep, because we do the projected activity, sometimes we're working on it a month in advance,
So it-
and then we'll
yeah.
pull those numbers in, yep,
just to clean that up,
Yep.
Not a big deal, just wanted to point it out.
yep. And those numbers, well, we'll still want those because we want to know where we're generally going to end up at. They won't affect going into the General Appropriations Act.
Like I said, I didn't know if it was a big deal or not, but it was
Yeah.
bugging me.
Well, I do like to try to forecast where we'll end up the end of the year at.
Credits on things, I don't know.
Well, I just wanted to note that too, that your zoning administrator is in Department 702, but your note says that you're going to transfer that when you do the chart of accounts update.
Yeah, I think when Sue created the line item, when we transitioned those positions, we were thinking, well, let's just get it into that new department. And probably if we had known, just the way things transpired, we probably would have put it in the 410, but we've just lived with it that way.
The anticipation is it would have been done at the beginning of the year, and they've been converting all the different jurisdictions throughout the state, and so we are pushed into the end of the year. So it does kind of falsely gauge what your department looks like.
So noted.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to 411.
Hey, one quick question. For you, Claire, and for Preston, I don't know what kind of devices y'all have. Do y'all have a need for like iPads to have in the field? I know the BSNA software that you provided a sample of, this is really for administrative management of the township, right? Not so much planning and zoning.
Oh, no,
permitting and stuff.
yeah, they will actually too. So like building department that will be online then, or on the cloud then too, if we do that. And the assessing, which they access regularly too. Claire has the same thing that you just saw me
Surface.
fooling with today, the Surface, and PT has a Surface too. We purchased those during COVID. And I think you have actually moved to Glenn's.
Yeah, thank you. I stopped working, and so I've got Glenn's now.
So,
Reason I was asking about an iPad, and, I know they're apples and oranges iPads to a Surface, they kind of do the same thing, but I didn't know if the BSNA cloud software, if you're going to be able to take full advantage of the capabilities of that in the field with a Surface. I don't know if they have an app that's optimized for a Surface or an iPad.
That's a good question.
And some of those iPads are expensive.
Yeah. Yep. And anything like that too, if we find that we could utilize like the software more effectively, and you can do more in the field that way, so you don't have to go back and then generate stuff into the computer. You can do it right there. But as we see the need for that, if we haven't budgeted for it, we'll just bring that back with a budget amendment.
Okay.
For that department.
We'll just take that money out of the supervisor's budget, don't worry about it.
That sounds good. Okay.
Okay. So 411, that's the zoning board of appeals. We have seen fewer meetings this year compared to last year. We are budgeting for some additional special meetings, as well as are budgeting for a recording secretary, just with Leslie being out. We've had Ann Wendling filling in. So that is likely not to continue into 2023, but we've just put it in there for contingency. I think that's it. I mean, it's pretty similar to what we had previously with the COLA adjustment.
Yeah, those appointed and elected commissioners are all adjusted. We do the same COLA adjustment for them. Okay, 412 with the Planning Commission.
Yep, same thing as the ZBA. We've got some additional special meetings that are planned with the zoning ordinance rewrite, and we're anticipating, hoping to have the master plan finalized before the end of 2022, but planning to have a number of special meetings for zoning ordinance rewrite, as well as we're finding that we're having a lot of items on the agenda, and so we, with the Planning Commission, discussed if there's going to be more than 4 items on the agenda, scheduling a special meeting on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, so that's another contingency for that.
How do you feel about that, Mindy?
I don't think there's enough on here.
For special meetings?
Well, you guys have had several special meetings through this year, correct?
Well, and with the zoning ordinance rewrite, we were talking about doing more there too. So if you got more on the agenda, plus you got the zoning ordinance rewrites.
Yeah, we had a number of special meetings in 2022, plus we had the master plan work sessions. So I would think the 5,000 should be.
Because we're doubling that budget.
But it
Yeah.
only says 5. Is that not right?
Well, that's if it's a maximum, it's under 5, but it's the better part of 5 if it's every single person's attending. Remember, sometimes there's fluctuations in that. So you can see the 2021 activity and the 2022 projected
The notes.
activity. Yep. Like I said, that's the maximum amount, like if you multiply it by every person attending. That actually is less frequent than always, you know? Sometimes there is a person missing, and that's why you'll see it's probably you've had more than 3 meetings extra meetings in 2021 and 2022, would be my guess, Claire. But that 2,800, if you went straight by those numbers, would be about 3 meetings. But again, the 2,800 in 21 and 22 has been the master plan meetings and what other ones?
GOREC.
Yeah, we had 2 GOREC special meetings.
You had a Lakemore special meeting?
That was 2021.
Okay, well, it's
But
all running
yeah,
together.
Yeah, I agree. It feels more recent.
Feels like it was March.
And then we had one joint session, I think, between the board and planning commission. When we
That was 2021.
well, when we discussed short-term rentals, that was in 2020. Oh, you're right, that was November, I think, of 2021.
It all blends together.
Yeah. But even at that, we've doubled that amount. So we'll see how it goes, and this is why we keep a watch on it through the year. And in past years, I think that there have been several years where we think we've done a better job at bringing budget amendments in a more routine nature. but I think it was maybe last year and this year, and I'll blame a delayed COVID effect. But we'll probably have some for you definitely in November and December. You will actually, for sure, as you see some of these numbers going forward. Let's see, I think we can skip over the 446 and then just hit to your special projects. Claire, which start on page 28 with 621.
Yep, so this, under the Village Center study, we're planning for the, not planning any expenses for master plan study. For zoning ordinance revision, we're anticipating, we've already gotten the first quarter from MEDC, and planning to, of township funds, spend about 36,000 in 2022. And then for 2023, we'll be looking at receiving the remaining grant, which is 22,500, plus an additional township expenses of about 44,000.
And that stratification, I did talk with Giffords Webster and asked him, would he be able to kind of give me a gauge? And he did it, like, they have it down to the penny. They know, he's like, here's exactly what you will have. This is the schedule we keep, you know, okay. So, but that was at the 36,875 for this year. We've only had one bill so far from them, which was the 7375 you see in the activity through October 31st. And as Claire mentioned, that revenue that's already been received, that did hit, if you look up in your revenue line item, in the other revenues, and that 22,500 is also in the 2023 revenue line item.
They don't want to pay all of it until we've adopted the ordinance. So they're giving it to us in phases. So the next one, the Lakes Overlay, Department 622. We've had a lot of discussions with the Planning Commission about the ordinary high water mark and delineating that, and it's a challenging kind of process to delineate. We've been successful with requiring that surveyors actually go out and designate an ordinary high water mark as opposed to the water's edge. And so a licensed registered surveyor can do that effectively, but it's expensive for the homeowner. And so one thing that we, in talking with Eagle and with Watershed Center and some other partners, found that it would be, one solution would be to have Wade Trim go out and set a benchmark at each one of the inland lakes, because they each have a different ordinary high water mark elevation level. So they would set a benchmark at each one of those lakes. And so that's the 8,600 estimate that they provided us with. Something that they're not going to have to do on an annual basis. They would do it every probably 5 years or so, is what we were thinking, because the ordinary high water mark changes, but very, very slowly compared to the water levels fluctuating. And so that would be a way where a surveyor or landscape company could go and actually take that benchmark elevation and set their surveying instrument to that, and then go to the homeowner's property, be able to accurately identify where the ordinary high water mark is, so they can accurately identify what the 50-foot setback is. And so we think that by spending this money, it's going to ensure accuracy and in the long run save the township money, just by ensuring that we're issuing land use permits with an accurate, consistent benchmark.
The inland lakes, how many of them have, and I'm not even sure the correct word, but the controlled,
None of them. Yeah,
we're sure about that,
yeah.
or they're not supposed to have?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been told by Eagle and by Wade Trim and.
Well,
by
doesn't
others.
Spider Lake empty into Arbutus 5?
I don't think so.
Isn't there a creek that runs across the road and down through Arbutus 5 to,
Yeah, but I don't think it gets all the way to Spider Lake. I think it just, somewhere
Okay.
up on top of the hill there.
Maybe that's something they could check.
Oh, you mean like down by Grace Road?
Huh?
Down by Grace Road? Is that what you're talking?
No, I think you
No,
probably mean
this
at
is
our,
right at Arbutus number 5.
yeah.
5.
You gotta, remember the little bridge you walk over? That's
Right,
over the
that's true.
creek.
That is-
So we've had Brian take a look at that, and I don't remember the details of it. I'll be the first to say I don't remember the details of it.
And I was-
But my recollection is that no, that wasn't the
And I
case.
was thinking that Arbutus number 1 had a pipe, and when that got so full, it run down, clear down the River Road, down over the hill, but I don't remember for sure. I'm just asking. I mean, if they're gonna check it, maybe they ought to check those things, because if those waters, the height is different than what you think, that's gonna change the high water.
Yeah, it would be a lot simpler if we were on a lake, if we had lakes that had the controlled high water
Like
mark.
Silver Lake,
because-
where they-
Exactly, then our job would be easier.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dialogue and effort that's gone into coming up with the solution for Wade Trim to do that surveying.
And you said we would do this every 4 to 5 years periodically? So it's just an ongoing expense to have to
I
reset?
think we're gonna try it. I would like to try it this year and see how it works, see how, how well the contractors and the applicants are able to utilize it, and then we'll reevaluate in 5 years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the impact on the land use permits and enforcement too.
Yeah, we're finding that, the actual cost of administering the Forest Lakes Overlay District is much higher than, a land use permit for other types of single-family residences. And so we're putting a lot more, resources into administering.
In the zoning, what do you use to determine the setback on a lake, the high water mark, or you've been using the water's edge?
Well, we've been using the ordinary high water mark for the past few years, because that's what the ordinance says. And so we require that a licensed surveyor delineate the ordinary high water mark. So we won't accept a site plan that shows the water's edge. If they're building anything within the 50-foot setback, we need to have something that's been surveyed that's showing it as the ordinary high water mark by a licensed surveyor.
Okay.
It's also useful too, not in just in land use permits, but for enforcement issues too, where we need to take a look at how far back they are from the ordinary high water mark.
Which would probably require us to get some surveying, or just the tools to be able to mark that benchmark elevation to go check it.
Okay, we'll move on to the next department. Does anyone have any other questions on that ordinary high water mark with Wade Trim? Okay.
So the 623 trail study, you'll see we're looking at pretty significant budget request, $80,000 for the Safe Routes to School engineering, and then $108,000 for the 3-mile trail engineering.
The 3-mile trail engineering with OHM, that's a hard number because we have that contract. We know we're getting those funds in from TART Trail. So that 108, while that does bump up our budget has been bumped up on the revenue side by 108 as well. The Safe Routes to School engineering is an estimate, and so we'll see how that goes and how it stratifies over the years. I know Prine and Newhoff, just talked with them today, and they were working through all of the SHPO and NEPA stuff and out taking pictures at some of the sites for the submission to the state. Now, that engineering cost for the Safe Routes to School, we do not have covered, so to speak, as far as like a specific grant coordinator or, like as TART does for the 3-mile trail engineering. However, that is one of the grant requests that we do have in for the ARPA County funds.
And then for Department 624, the Bay Shore plan, ideally, I guess I would love to put more money into this with the anticipation of engaging the business owners and do some kind of proactive planning along US 31. But I think realistically, we're looking at 2024 before we're able to do some targeted, focused planning on that corridor, just given the current workload with the zoning ordinance and other projects that we're working on.
And Claire and Carl have been keeping their eye out for funding for different grant opportunities that are out there that are tailored to that type of project. And this 15,000, Warren Call reached out to the township and to talk about some work that Traverse Connect would like to involve East Bay Township with. So I asked him to send me a proposal. He did. It's 15,000. He would like to come to the township board at a future meeting. I told him he'd be welcome to come and go over what the services that they're looking at providing the township. But it's basically some economic development strategy, site visits with employers, follow up with those employers, conducting a corridor improvement feasibility study, providing quarterly reports on those activities, and I'm sure there's a lot more detail that he'll go into when he's able to come and present to us, which I'm sure he would be willing to, even the end of this year, if we can get him scheduled on a meeting. They've been doing some work for, I'm not going to say because I'll probably get the townships wrong right now. I thought it was Garfield, but I'm not sure. And I'm not sure about the city, so I guess I'll leave that for when Warren presents to the board.
I think that's it for planning and zoning. The only other item was and this is at the end of your packet, but we're making some recommendations on some adjustments to fees, but.
Why don't you go ahead and skip to that, Claire? I think it starts on page, if someone can find that,
Page 57 of 58. So you'll see the ones that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that we're recommending an adjustment to. So for 2022, right now the fee is a range of $50 to $200 for a land use permit for multifamily dwellings and for commercial. And it's based on the cost of the improvement. And it's always $200. We're recommending just for it to be a flat $200 cost. Planned unit developments, right now it's at $800. I recommended moving it up to $1,000 just because it requires 2 public hearings. It's the only application that requires 2 public hearings. So even without paying any meeting fees for the township board, it's another public hearing notice and posting. And so I'm recommending moving that from $800 up to $1,000. And then the stormwater appeal, that's for appealing for a variance to the stormwater ordinance, and we just recently received an application for that and realized that we didn't have that as part of the fee schedule, but the Planning Commission is the designated body to hear appeals to the stormwater ordinance, and so consistent with the commercial fee for any commercial variance, we're recommending $1,000 for a variance to the stormwater ordinance. So any entity pursuing a stormwater permit is going to be a commercial, industrial, multifamily developer.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if we're going with COLA and raising wages associated with the employees, shouldn't these fees go up in the same, because
Yeah.
it's still taking them the same amount of time,
Yeah.
and now we're getting less money?
Yeah, and I don't think they've been adjusted for a very long time. So, I mean, yeah, and I remember when, who was the Wade Trim consultant that we used just before? Arthur had mentioned that to me. He's like, he would have liked to seen things reconstructed a little bit differently. He felt like a lot of the planning and zoning effort should be covered through cost. Typically, in the past, what we've done at board's direction is really compare them across different or other local municipalities. And so they've been pretty well and competitive with that. But I do agree with you. I mean, I think you could easily do an adjustment. We can have the planning and zoning take a look at these with respect to some of the other regions to make sure if we have any outliers.
Yeah, and I have taken a look, and they are consistent regionally, but I think one thing that we were hoping to do was, once we update the zoning ordinance, take a look at all the fees, because I think the zoning ordinance there's gonna be some change in the application process and what's required, and so we were thinking that it would be kind of once the ordinance is adopted, taking a look at the fees and making adjustments at that time.
I guess you and I can fight tonight then.
I'm freezing, so what do you want to fight about? Get me warmed
Well,
up.
I still have a problem with zoning board of appeals going from what it was to $1,000 last year or the year before. My concern is, not for the big developments, they're the ones that should pay for it, but the average tax-paying citizen that wants to do something that's not major to pay that much.
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's 200. So we did bump it up last year. We bumped it up from $50 to $200. And then the 1,000 is for a commercial appeal.
Oh, this is just commercial?
Yeah, the
Oh, I
1,000.
thought, when we talked
$1,000.
about it before, I thought that somebody said they couldn't divide it.
Yeah, we've got residential, we're doing $200, and then.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Any type of, which is still, was a pretty substantial increase last year, from 50 up to 200.
You cool too?
You're looking at the special meeting. This is just the regular.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I still need to get riled up.
I was gonna say, you cooled him right down. You did the opposite of what you intended.
I did just nudge the heat up.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
at 67.
I don't know what's going on, but I'm freezing.
You're not the only one.
Any other questions with any changes here?
I'm with Mindy on, having some kind of alignment with, additional costs, and I guess you guys are going to cover that in the zoning ordinance update. Are we gonna miss out on capturing those costs in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, we can do it now, too. I mean, that's an option. We can certainly adjust them for this fiscal year, because our categories are not likely to change, or if they are, it would be pretty minimally. Some of the information required, or the checklists, or those types of things, but I think, based on the board's recommendation, we could certainly adjust it now.
We didn't adjust these last year when we went up close to 6%, and then we're going up another 9%. I really think that we need to adjust these, because looking at wages, does it take more than an hour to do a residential addition permit with all the things that you have to do? I mean.
Absolutely, and that was Arthur's point. He was like, he didn't feel the fees were
You're not-
nearly
you're not
high enough.
Paying for what they're doing for that.
Right.
I think that these need to go up a universal percentage, whatever that percentage is, but that's how I feel.
So there's two ways you can think about it, right? You could do a gradual increase on an annual basis. That's a lot of changing, and it's a more marginal increase, and so what you'll see is these are pretty neatly stratified.
Yes.
Or you could do a less frequent blocked change.
I think that it's time for a block change.
Other members' input?
Yeah, I would support, us picking a reasonable percentage to increase to cover the costs and go with it across the board.
Okay, Glenn, Matt, or Sue?
It doesn't matter to me. I do think some of our fees, even though that you say that they're, they line up with others, the fees should line up with what it costs. And Glenn's right, on the special meetings fees, your planning commission's $1,000, your zoning board, and that's 7 members. And your zoning board of appeals is only 5 members, and yet it's $1,000. Well, I know, but if I'm coming in because I need something done and I want an appeal and I have to have a special meeting as a resident, $1,000 is a lot of money.
Well, you
That's for a
wouldn't,
special meeting, that's not just a regular meeting, is it?
well, that's not residential, so that's not, it's 200 for a resident. It's
But
just
if we're not
1,000 for the
gonna-
commercial.
They're looking at this right here where it says special meeting and not over here where it says
But-
voting
I
board
know,
of
but if I
appeals.
needed to come in and have a special meeting for some reason.
If there is no meeting
There is no
scheduled
CBA.
and you need to come in, it would be a special meeting, correct?
Repeat that?
There's no zoning board of appeals meeting scheduled. You don't have anything on the list. So a property owner wants to come in, and they want the meeting, they want to get it done.
But that wouldn't be considered a special meeting if they were before the regularly scheduled time. That's, because what the ZBA meets on is, they meet the second Tuesday of the month, if there is an appeal, but they don't pay for that as a special meeting if they're waiting to that regular time. What a special meeting is if they have to meet in between those times.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. It's still a lot of money for an individual that has that need.
Don't you think that 30 days is a pretty short period of time?
There's always that exception.
But
You have special meetings.
right, and I understand that, but then they're requiring all of those resources to come there again, and we're about at that, and ZBA is 7 with the 2 alternates, we just haven't had a full 2 alternates. Right now, we have 1 alternate,
Well, you have the 7, and then you could have a site visit on top of that,
yeah,
and you have a recording secretary, so
Right.
you've got a lot of costs there.
yeah.
The 2 alternates are included in that wage scale. When they come, they're paid.
Oh, they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy job.
May I suggest something? We're going to be asked to pass this resolution. You got 3, 4 things that I don't see any real problem with, but maybe come back at a later date with a revised list of what, I guess it isn't the commercial that bothers me, it's the single family or just the residents that come in here that bother me when I see the prices escalate.
You do.
So let's do that, we'll change for the annual resolution that we'll do with the fee, we'll change those highlighted items, but then we'll come back with a more comprehensive look at some changes in the fees at a later date. I'm thinking prior to the zoning ordinance then, is what I'm hearing.
I mean,
I would
but,
like it first of the year.
yeah, first of the year, so that's sort of captured in a new calendar year.
But I don't think we have to do it before we do the budget.
Okay.
But I'm 107.
I agree. Hey, just a quick question. You were talking about the stormwater appeal that wasn't currently addressed, but you're going to take that into account with this change. Not budget-related or cost-related, but just process-related. Why does that appeal go through planning commission? I know the zoning ordinance is written that way, but what's the intent?
That's a good question. The stormwater ordinance is just a separate ordinance, standalone, and in the ordinance, it says that an appeal is an opportunity for an applicant. There's 2 different standards or conditions that need to be met to have an appeal approved, or a variance approved, and it says the township board shall appoint a body, so it could be the ZBA, it could be the planning commission, it could be the township board, it could be the body that hears the appeals, and And that was that 2019 resolution that we found that the township board had appointed the planning commission as the body. And this is, from what I can tell, the first official application that's been submitted. There was one that was originally posed to the planning commission, that was Arbutus Ridge, but there was never a formal hearing on it. They ended up withdrawing it and meeting the ordinance requirements.
Because
Is
they.
that your recollection? That was
Yeah,
what I
'cause they designed
gathered.
it
Yeah.
one way, and then they built it another way, and then they wanted a variance. And we're like, you can't do a variance after you already built it.
They ended up adjusting, they ended up going out there and
They
redoing the
met
site.
ordinance, so they didn't need a variance.
I always heard it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Do you remember that resolution? Do you remember that resolution number? 2019?
2019-27.
Question,
It's not on here. Why is it not on this website?
if you have a
26,
stormwater
28.
appeal, the township's got to have an engineer there, don't they?
Yeah, so we.
And they do that free gratis or no?
I was just going to find out what month it was in case someone wanted to look at it.
Okay,
So the applicant is paying
okay.
indirectly for the stormwater variance, but there's not an application fee, but they're paying for the engineering review and time at the meeting.
Matt, we can find out for you that resolution, 2019-27, we can find out for you what minutes those were from, so maybe they'll have some verbiage in there. from some of
November,
the-
it was November 2019.
2019.
Okay.
I just watched the meeting.
In the same token, and looking at the fees, I have a note, with regards to the escrows, if the escrows get used up, we get more money, right? So we don't, it's okay that we don't need to, increase these amounts ahead of time? Or are you gonna look at that too?
You know, we looked at it last year and made some adjustments in the escrow and talked with Wade Trim, because Wade Trim is the majority. We've got some legal expenses as well, but I think they're working pretty good right
Okay.
now, because this is what we start with. And then after a site plan is approved, then Wade Trim will give us an estimate and say, to get them through their Eagle permits for water and sewer, request another 10 grand. And so it's much more than what you see here, but this is preliminary engineering, and it's gotten us through.
I'll just say that, engineering rates are going up just like everything else is.
Well, yeah, you guys are getting big raises probably.
You can't pay for anything with them.
I think that's all that you have on there, correct? All the departments that you have? Any other questions for Claire before she can hightail it to get home to her kids? Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll swing back to page 12, which is the Township Board budget. And these are pretty standard fees in here. The board meeting fees are adjusted by that same COLA adjustment. I've accounted for some special meetings. It's well within what we've spent in previous years. And typically, while we do engage with legal counsel a lot, often it is charged off either to an escrow account or a different department. So it's typically pretty limited what's charged directly to the 101 fund for legal expenses.
So I have a question. When I was working on my budget, I added the election commission to receive the same meeting wage as the other commissions. It's not under elections. Should it be here? This is where we typically pay them the.
Oh, do you pay them out of here? And it's under additional?
Suggested that we put it under elections so that it's consistent with election expenses.
Yeah, that's fine. We can put it under elections. We'll just create that line item if it's not there already.
That's what I had
Yeah.
marked that we would do, is they would receive the same pay rate
Yeah.
as other boards and commissions,
And-
instead of just the special meeting fee.
Yeah, and lots of times what I'll do when I'm taking a look at this is not even necessarily taking the rate that they're getting times the number of perceived extra meetings we may have. Lots of times I'll look back at the previous years and look at the payroll that hit that, so I wouldn't even have seen if it was a difference between a
Right.
special meeting
Well, and that's why I had
or
marked it.
elections.
that
Yeah,
That should be taken care of. We looked at it last year,
Yeah.
but it didn't hit the budget in time, and so it wasn't added, and that's why they were still receiving
sure,
their $30, but
sure.
I just think that the time that they've been incurring, you know, that it warrants that the pay be the same.
Sure. Okay,
Sure, but
So you want it added under election?
yeah, we'll create that line item and, okay, so, after legal expense consultation services, you'll see a 12.7 down in there, and I have an error in here for you, a slight one. When I went back, I thought that I put that 12.7 in there with respect to the CIP. And you'll see that listed in the details. And that's the capital improvement plan. And having talked with Claire about that, that goes through the planning commission and is required for the RRC certification. But with limited capacity in planning and zoning, we're looking at doing that through a consultant. And so that CIP should be, probably, she said, she used to see them between 10 to 15,000 with a consultant would be standard. And that's what I thought at first that 12.7 was. But then I realized that 12.7 I had put in there earlier was actually for the personnel manual. You'll remember we went out for an RFP in the summer for a personnel manual. And Nick and I, with our schedules in the summer, contacted the two respondents and said we'd be looking at it more in late summer, fall. And so we'll be bringing back a recommendation between those two RFPs. And the one that we're recommending, the contract price is 12.7. So that's actually what that 12.7 is for. So to correct that error, what I would probably do is just take that 10 to 15,000 for the CIP and add that to the 12.7 and adjust that point in the budget.
So are we looking at an entire employment manual revision, or is that for emergency services only?
No, it's for the whole thing. If you recall, we had updated the manual, I mean, just the electronic part of it, so all is all in the
I
PDF
just
to
wanted
get
to make sure,
them.
when you mentioned Nick, I wanted to make sure what we were looking at.
Yep. And we've been in touch with that consultant and let them know that we're looking at a recommendation and made sure that that's timing still fit with their workload, and also if they could honor that contract price, because that came in the summertime, and we're actually looking at doing the work starting in the new year, and they were fine with both of those things. So with that,
12.7 plus 15, is that?
correct, so it'd be like 27.7 there. God bless you. And then moving on down to the education, it is just for you guys' knowledge, for planning. MTA is, for better or worse, in Grand Traverse County for the next 2 years. So just so you know. I'm not sure why they did 2 years in a row, because they usually try to move
They
it.
got a better price.
Did they?
That's what's
I
been
think
going
that's
on a
what it
lot.
is.
Okay. Well, good for them. And moving on to the audit and accounting, you'll see Raymond, we used, if you recall, the last time we went out for RFP, we ended up hiring a different company than Raymond. I don't even remember the name of the company. And I
We don't need to mention.
probably will say we won't mention it because both Tracy, Sue, and I came back with a recommendation to all of you that while we got through the audit, and our audit was fine, it was not the most great experience.
Something better.
Yeah, it was not a good situation as far as the commitment of resources on their part to doing the audit. And so we recommended to you at the time, and the board approved going with Raymond, because we went back and talked with Steve Peacock, who presents to us, and said, hey, if we switched a contract over to you, even though we're delayed a year, would you still honor the same RFP prices? And he said, absolutely, we'll come over and your subsequent year can be our year one. And so this year, I talked with Sue and Tracy about, checking with Raymond. I know they did this with, with Metro, when, gosh, she's not gone very long and I'm forgetting her name. No, through Metro. The accountant that just retired.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna, Kimberly. Kim?
No, her predecessor,
Robin?
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, Robin. Robin had done the same thing as well, as checked with Raymond, and they provided an ongoing price for subsequent years. I asked Steve about this, and they sent over this revised service, and you can see that on the third page of that. They have 2023, 24, and 25, and then the calculations are done for you down here in the notes. It's a 13.8% initial adjustment and then 5% per year per the contract. I didn't think that that was unreasonable considering the change in costs that we've seen, plus that they delayed a year in their initial contract, and we're willing to do that for us.
One of the requirements that we have held to is that they need to be able to change the people involved in the audit. Are they prepared to change out who's been doing it so that we keep fresh eyes on things?
I think they have changed it even within that time period, too. So I don't know that it's been, say, 3 or 4 years that we've had the same staffing do that.
Well, it's been kind of weird with COVID, too, because we did 2 online years. But I think they're a big enough team, they can do that, but we just want to make sure we're staying consistent with that. And they did come in at very short notice when we asked for that new eyes, that new firm.
Well, what I appreciated is they held their cost and
Is
as
there a
well.
policy that says how often you gotta go out for bids?
No. Yeah, we did. It was,
And
it
then-
was not to change the year that new officials were coming in. It was to happen after the new officials came in so that they could do that moving forward.
Oh, that's an
So it would-
internal. I thought he was asking by statute. Are you asking,
Not a
like?
statute, what our policy.
Oh, okay.
I thought we had a 3-year policy or something to go out for
But it was
bids.
so that it would not coincide when new officials were coming in, because it
Right.
would be very difficult to them to work with auditors on information that they may not have been a part of. And we didn't necessarily, at the time, we didn't change firms, but it was the statement that they needed to be able to change people that were doing the audit on their side, too, so that it wasn't a consistent set of auditors always
Okay.
looking at the
I
same
just,
thing.
I didn't remember exactly what all that was, but
And we can pull that and provide that for you, too, as long as we're consistent with that. Does anyone have any issue continuing with Raymond?
I don't have a problem with them.
Okay. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Standard association dues. The only thing different with that I'll note is I'm looking at adding that flat fee for the continuing education resources. I have heard from some personnel at another township that they utilize that in the past year to 2 years, and they've really found some good usage with that. And it's a nice convenient way, as well as everyone's gotten used to attending a lot of stuff online, offers a convenient way for our appointed officials to get the knowledge and education that's useful to them.
So are you looking at the flat fee that
Yeah.
MTA is offering, and all different
Yeah.
departments and commissions would be using it out of the township board?
Yeah, I didn't stratify it. I can't recall what the flat fee is right now, but it's not that much more. I think it might be 2,000 more or something. And it wasn't worth breaking it out. I don't know why we would break that out. It's all part of when you do the association dues on an annual basis. I mean, I'm sure that they would let you sign on at any time, mid-year, but that's when most people do it. And that's pretty much the sum total of the 101 department. Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll look at supervisors. Actually, I think what we can do is take the supervisors, clerks, and treasurers and just do them all together. They're quite similar. On pages 13, 16, and 19. You have the salaries for the official and/or the deputy, the education. Again, supplies were those things that were limited, that weren't capital, that were specific to that department. And the standard investment that we make in professional education and development with the association dues, education, and the either mileage or travel or lodging or meals that are associated with those. You have a cell phone stipend, and that really covers the sum of what's in each of those. Tracy did note on hers that her supply at $2,000 is a cash counting machine.
And Tracy and I, we brought to the board back in June to increase the deputy cell phone reimbursement to 65 because they now need to use their cell phones to be able to access all the banks and do all those transactions. But that has not happened. It's in the budget to happen in 2023. So both the deputies and the principals will receive $65 a month, just like the planning and zoning department and the paramedics.
Because, I guess the deputies, I'm not sure, I guess I'm asking, do they get phone calls or?
They have to use their cell phone to be able to access all the banking, all the transactions we do. There used to be a code that was on a key fob, but now they're required to use their cell phone it's all part of a cloud program on their cell phones. They don't allow us to use fobs anymore, so they have to use their phone every time we need to do a lookup or make payment, do payroll, accounts payable, look up to do anything with our banking. It's all by cell phone. You're not looking at it on your cell phone, but you have to have the key, and it's through an app that you have to use your phone for. And so they're using them.
Authentication,
I'm sorry?
third-party authentication.
Correct, yes, thank you. Yep. Yep, so it is required.
So this isn't for taking phone calls, this is for doing banking.
Well, and they do have, Debbie does do appointments on passports outside hours. She does take calls. Holly does take calls to make arrangements to come here for people for elections and different things that way. And I do require Holly to monitor her emails and things during off times. But the main part of it, they used to get half of that because of those obligations. But now that they have to use their cell phone for that third party, it made sense for it to be the same rate as what the others were all receiving.
I have a question about cell phone bills in general. All those bills, in my opinion, are going down. Is 65 still the appropriate amount?
My cell phone bill's not going down. My flat rate is the same.
Well, there's the bill for the service, and then you're paying to reimburse employee to use their hardware too. They're responsible to buy the phone, because they don't package them in contracts anymore. You have to buy it outright. And if they lose the phone or drop it on the ground and break it, they're responsible for fixing it.
I can only speak to what I pay for mine, and between the cell phone and the coverage and the insurance, because I do insurance because they're so stinking expensive, that it is less than, the stipend is less than that. Not that it should meet it, I'm not saying that, but it is less than that. Glenn,
No, I was gonna ask a question. If this is what they gotta use them for, could the township get a better plan if they got, whatever it is, 3 phones or whatever? Because you're not gonna have all of the use on them that a personal phone would have. I'm just asking the question. I don't,
Well, for a long time, I did have a private phone and a township phone. The township phone was actually more expensive than the,
yeah, I don't know. I haven't
and that's
priced
why I
this
just
stuff
went
out.
to one phone.
I think Bob is the only one now who has a township phone, township service, and I think his runs 55 a month.
Next is township, too.
Oh, it's on a different bill, though, sorry, I was thinking about just the Verizon bill.
I wouldn't recommend it. Now you're asking people to carry 2 phones. I do it personally because I keep my work stuff separate from my personal stuff. So I've got 2 separate phones. I elect to do that. It's kind of a pain. People are probably going to be less inclined to keep that work phone in their pocket on after hours if there's an emergency, because it's just something else to carry around, and then
Yeah, and I had done that as well.
Yeah,
Because,
it's-
we had, attorneys had talked about FOIA. You have to hand over your personal phone if you get
Oh.
FOIA.
That's the one.
Most
drawback
everything
to
is
having your
segregated now,
personal phone
too.
is-
And through Verizon, our employees do get a discount if they choose to have a Verizon phone. I think it's 19%.
I'll tell you what, Verizon, I want to go to something else. I haven't got any signal up where I'm at.
You know, I've heard that up there
Yeah,
from
I-
several people. Brett has Verizon, and he has to get he has a booster.
I don't know, I just
we
matter of
converted to
getting around to
AT&T
see
for that
who's
same
got what.
reason.
But Verizon was gonna put a tower up on one of our water towers, and that kind of went away.
I don't recall right now. You mean before, when you were here, or when I was here, or
No,
what?
when you were here, just within the last.
Oh, actually, we had one company that was looking at the new property, and they were looking at disguising it in a flagpole. And they were very hot about, contacting me and so forth, and thought that that would be something they'd do pretty quickly. And then during COVID, it just kind of went cold, and I did reach out at one time. I go, what's going on? I don't care either way, but just kind of let me know. And she's like, yeah, still a priority, but the cell phone companies are very funny companies. And the communication is tough with them too, which is kind of ironic, right?
Okay, I just,
And the only other things, I had requested that we look at doing some adjustments in the clerk's office for the structure of the walls and this, a walk-up courtesy counter service desk, and Beth has said that that should go under a capital improvement plan, so that will be discussed on how we can move forward with that at some point, but it's not in this budget.
Yep, so it's about $200,000 that Sue had requested put in the budget. And as I said, I think that should really go through with the capital improvement plan process, is the appropriate method for that to do. Okay, so with that, we'll move to any other questions on either of those 3 departments? We'll move to Department 191, which is elections. And with this one, Sue had submitted a budget for next year, I believe it was $112,000. But I took a look at it and took, because there's no election slated for next year. Now, even though there's no elections, there could be an election. So what I did was, instead of budgeting 112 and having that shock to the system and potentially not using it and so forth, I went and looked back 8 years at what was spent in all of the the election department over that 8 years. I brought each of those years forward to 2022 dollars, and then I averaged those across all of the years. It came out to about 51,000 something annually. And so then I took a look at how she had it broken out and historically across the different line items, how it was stratified. And then I took that 52.5 and stratified that across those line items. And so what I think would work well is that instead of having budgets that are 0 or 112,000 when there's no election plans, or, you can see here even the 2021 activity versus the 2022 activity, that type of volatility, is to budget something like the 52,500 on an annual basis, and then we would transfer that out into a special fund where on years where it's spent, then it can spend down that fund balance. When years where it's not spent, it can gain that fund balance. And there is some, and I have some documentation here later I can show you, there is some fund balance in elections that we can use as well to draw that into the new fund that'll capture those unspent funds and drain them down when they are being spent.
Okay, well, the hope is that there are no elections, but in the past, we've always budgeted for it, so we don't have to work in the negative until the board action can be done. And so that was figuring on 2 elections, the budget that I proposed. There are a couple adjustments. I know that you worked on this, but there still isn't the $6,000 in the maintenance agreement that needs to be paid now annually. That did not get added back in. You left the $3,000, but you.
Oh, we talked about that one.
We did.
We mentioned that we
Election
didn't.
Commission.
Yeah, so with that, we can just take that, with the 6,000, while that might hit line item
It should hit on.
802.2.
Software, 802.2.
Yep. Well, it will hit there. There's sufficient in that line items, and as you know, we can switch between line items. So there would be sufficient funds to pay that, because that's not even
I
in,
would prefer it's in there automatically, because we know the cost will be incurred. We're not going to have to do an adjustment through a cost center. I think it should be there when we adopt the budget.
okay, so we can switch the 2,000 to 6,000 and then pull the 4.
Gotta get them, there's no lines in them.
It's 2,000 currently.
2,000.
It should be under.
6,000.
It should be 9,000 total.
I thought the
Because we had
software was,
planned on 3,000 and then the $6,000, so it was a $9,000 request.
What is it for?
The
Software?
maintenance equipment, all of the tabulator devices, the state paid the first few years, and now we are on the hook for the next 5 at $6,000 a year.
So where's the 3,000? I'm sorry.
The $3,000 was for software that the county would be charging us, those type of things that
just,
they do.
there's no specific expense, it's just there for those software. The 6,000 is a specific expense.
It is,
That $6,000 cost is incurred even if all the machines are sitting idle.
that is correct.
And that cost will incur too, even if they don't have an election next year.
Correct.
What I was telling Sue was, even at 2,000 in that line item, it doesn't matter, because you've got 52,500 in the department. We just shift that line item over.
However, since that has been paid by the state for the past few years, this is a new that wasn't included in your 8-year go-back, so we need to put that in there going forward, I think. And that way it will level off at the end, right?
Is that an annual expense? Okay.
So I think, I get where you went with the going back, and that makes sense to me that there's, this is, assuming that 2023 is a year that doesn't have an election, we're actually banking money for the following year, so that there isn't this
Right.
peak and valley, especially since we know 2024 is going to be a peak, right? with the presidential election in it, I think that makes sense. I just think we do need to add that $6,000 in there because of this expense that we previously haven't had to pay. So that we can, at the end of the peak and valley, we're actually level.
Well, and the same thing would be the election commission line item too, because that hasn't been incurred out of this department before.
But that's going to lower a line item in another place, isn't it?
It's going to go into elections. It's been a special pay at the $30 under the township board, but it's now going to be put under elections in the 191.
So, but it's a deduction into the township.
It's an increase.
It's an
It
increase.
was only $30 before.
I know,
now
but
it's
we
gonna
gotta take
go
the 30 out
Regular
still.
payment of 100.
Well, maybe. I mean, you guys have had a lot of special meetings as a trustee, not as an election commissioner, and it all comes out of that same 101 right now. That's why I'm saying we should segregate it out and have it be under elections so that it is identified specifically what kind of a cost it is. And so that's an increase that would have to happen under the election cost center.
Wouldn't those election wages, I mean, not election wages, wouldn't those election commission wages, because those have to be board members, they have to be trustees, wouldn't those be considered additional meetings?
Well, but it's a separate commission that they have to be at. That it's just like a planning commission where we have a township board representative at the planning commission or the ZBA. They're being paid out of those cost centers. They're not being paid out of township board cost center. Should be the same thing. It should be paid out of the 191 cost center.
And that's fine, like I said, we don't have the actual line item built.
Right.
So we can transition that into a line item,
Right.
no problem.
Yeah, and it would be the same 706,000, for the last six numbers, just like the other commission wages are. But it would be under the election commission cost center.
It would be separate from election wages then?
Yeah. It would be separated out because of their statutory duty to be an election commission member. And that doesn't include the clerk or the deputy clerk. We don't get paid extra money. It's just the trustees that are required to be on that commission.
Because election wages are just for the people working the election. As a commissioner, we can meet anytime, every year.
Anytime there's a need.
We pay the commissioners the same, though, as other appointed,
No,
though.
we have not. That's what I'm proposing. They've only been receiving a $30 stipend or $30 payment, even though it's a commission, just like Planning Commission, just like ZBA, just like Board of Appeals, just like Park Commission. It has just never been set at the same rate as those others, and that's what I've proposed, is that it is paid at that same rate and identified as the commission. And so instead of $30, it's the $137.85 that's being projected for each of those other commissioners through the other departments.
Well, I don't really think that anything needs to change on the wages. I mean, they just fall under commissioner. It just sounds like me that it's not been paid properly.
Moving forward, it needs to, so it wouldn't be part of your 8-year projection. It would be new, just like Mindy had said about the other.
So we just need to put in a line item, but we can't put in a line item until the chart of accounts is done.
Because they haven't looked at it, we can. That's how we're able to add the new escrows and the new SADs that we've been doing.
Oh, because I was under, I think you had
I know,
told me
but
we
because they
couldn't
haven't
add
gotten
them.
to us again, we can. That's why we've been able to do that. So it would be added in, it's just all going to flow into the new chart of accounts once that's taken care of. It's been a long wait.
Yeah, that's what Heather said. Okay, so we'll add the $6,000 in there. We'll add in a line item for the, whatever the terminology is for the line item on the other, like 411 or 412,
Right.
board meeting fees.
It'd be the 706,000, which would be the same, it says commission.
Board meeting fees, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so any other questions on that?
I just had, the $6,000 for the maintenance of the equipment. Is that a recommendation or a requirement?
It's a requirement.
By the manufacturer or by the state?
By the state.
Okay. So even without an election?
Yes.
You've got stuff that's collecting dust that has to be,
Because it is required to be. Yep.
man, that seems like a waste of money.
And we
There's-
don't get any say in that. It
Yeah.
just has to be done.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah, here it,
Okay, with assessing, you'll see pretty standard. I will note that the appraisals that you'll see in the 2022 projected activity, that 9750 was the center ice appraisal that the board approved.
Didn't we do one at Tamarack too?
That was the previous year. It was actually hit.
My years are going.
Yeah, yeah. This tax tribunal stuff goes pretty slowly, too. Because if you look at this case with the center ice, we're looking at 2018, 19, 20, and 21. And we're just now getting to this. And just as a brief update on that, they have a pre-conference hearing in mid-November. Now, prior to doing the appraisal, council and Jim Baker came to an amount with Darren's help to potentially stipulate to a number and have them withdraw the case. They turned that down, and we've done the appraisal. We're on strong footing, but just in trying to avoid the legal costs, we're offering that same one over the next week for them to be able to take it. And if they don't take it, then we'll be proceeding to the full tribunal. But we are on strong legal footing going to the tribunal. So it's one of those cases where, quite frankly, it's defying logic on the other side. I mean, they're just not making rational decisions based on the numbers. But we've seen that before with one other tax tribunal, and we were able to sit down with the petitioner. And Jim and I mean, it was kind of at the 11th hour as well. And we were able to sit down and talk with them through it. And they ended up withdrawing the tax tribunal and stipulating to a different number. So we'll see what happens with this one.
So have we recently taken anything all the way through tax tribunal?
Not for a long time, no. We've had several cases.
Right.
Several cases. And I can give you an update on those because I've got them right on the computer. But the attorneys that we've have done an excellent job with those. We started using Carrie Zeitz, and she's done a really nice job. And Tom knows center ice backwards and forwards, and he's handling center ice case for us, so. Okay. Let's see, we did the 215.
I have a question on that.
217.
before
Yeah.
we move on. With transitioning the pictometry from local to
Oh, yeah.
county,
Yeah.
does it actually give the residents more access to it? Or aren't we sure yet?
I don't have the definitive answer for that question. I think there is some access to it right now, actually. But I know that with the county, yes, there will be access. There are some parts of it that they don't have access to. So the measuring tools and some of the things, and that's all based on Eagle View's experience across the country of what's worked and not worked as far as providing that information. But they'll have good graphic images available to the public. Yep. And I'm glad you brought that up because I did forget to mention, as you guys might recall, years ago, the county tried to, I don't even know if it was the county so much as maybe it was the conglomerate of townships tried to go together to do pictometry, and it didn't fly. No, really, no pun intended, but there you go. And since then, now Garfield does it, Traverse City does it. There was another resurgence of that when we signed on in 2018. And with that, it was us, and then same time Peninsula Township, and then just recently Long Lake. So there's like 5 entities that fly right now. And I know when I see the Eagle View rep, at the MTA conference, we are always talking about how can we just coordinate these because it's just ridiculous waste. And so really pushed through the county, and Jim Baker has done a nice job working with administration in bringing that topic back up and getting everyone together for a meeting, getting with Eagle View, coming up with some prices. And Grand Traverse County is really just kind of taking the initiative, knowing that they might not cover all of their costs. They're looking to cover 40% of their costs. So they're willing to put out 60% and then stratify the 40% over the remaining participating townships. They knew to get the 5 of us that are already doing flights, they had to come in below our contracted amount. And so they worked with that and kind of figuring out what the stratification of that would be. And obviously, for us, it's a nice savings on an annual basis. Now, next year, this is what is intended. There may be a point where I come to you and say, hey, this has fluctuated a little bit because we're transitioning from one contract to another, and we haven't negotiated those out fully with Eagle View yet. But that's, the intent right now is to be fully on that county's contract next year. They'll do another flight, which actually is good for us because we just did a flight this year. So we've got a 2019 and a 2022 flight. And then we were just paying out the remaining 2 years of our contract, would have been over the next 2 years. Instead, we'll have an updated flight and then go in. And the county is doing the 3-inch pictometry across the majority of the county. They are going to like the 6-inch in some places, but it's the very rural places. So Mayfield Township, parts of Fife Lake Township, and parts of Whitewater, but some places will be mixed. Acme Township will be mixed between 3 and 6-inch. I think Kingsley, Paradise is mixed, Fife Lake and the Village and so forth. And the county board did approve that, so they are going forward with it. So we're kind of happy about that savings.
Almost pays for the software on the new equipment.
Yep. Okay.
Contract service, is that a good number? I know the county sometimes delays for our assessors.
You're exactly right, they do, and that's estimated based on going just through their quarterly ones. And it's interesting because the assessing quarterly ones are not always exactly specific. Like, you'll get the CPO, and because of the way they base it, it's an automatic, almost identical, unless they've had a wage or some contract change or something, union contract
Right.
change. But this one is not, so it's a little harder to estimate. But yeah, and just taking a look at those recent invoices. Okay, with that, we're on page 18, which is 247. This is the Board of Review. You can see that's a pretty minimal expense and kind of standard. And we'll move on to Township Hall, as we've gone through Department 253 already. This is very, very much a standard moving forward. I will point out that the capital outlay at 970, that does include the amount that you have here in this BS&A on going to the online. That has 2 components to it. They offer a total cost in there, but part of that covers your new annual fee. So we used to be, and I'll tell you, this is not an inexpensive investment. We used to be about $10,000 a year for BS&A's annual service contract. It moves to about $25,000 a year for the cloud service.
Thankfully, we got that heads up from some other jurisdictions that said, hey, did you guys see the bounce? And so we've been kind of watching for that.
Yeah, actually, and I think that was with the IT, right? We didn't get that bounce. Yeah, we did not get that bounce, by the way, which is nice.
That is good.
Yeah, we only went up a couple $100 with them, I think.
Okay, good.
This when you take a look at the BSNA literature that you have here, you'll look at this line item of 35,595, and you'll say, Beth, you didn't budget enough in there. It's up there, that's right. It's higher up. That's, what I took out was the amount that covers the annual cost for that year. And I verified with BSNA that that was included in that total amount, and then just put that in the appropriate place.
So it's in 802,009 or 009, or is it in 970?
It is in 802,009. You'll see that that has jumped up. And then line item 970,265, we have 10,000 in there. And that's that server replacement from IT Right that I mentioned to you, that they said to anticipate in the 2023 fiscal year.
What's that's a server that sits here in the township hall? What purpose does it serve?
It's the backup. I mean, everything goes onto there, plus they back up elsewhere too. So they have us layered so many different ways, it's not even funny. And if you want to get more technical than that, I'd probably have you
Yeah, I mean,
reach out to the sales.
I'm not a computer technical person,
So if
but,
everything crashes here, it's not just saved here, it's also saved off-site.
gotcha. How old is the existing one?
I don't know the answer to that. I can't recall.
While you were still Supervisor Glenn, was that 2016, 2015? Was it in 2015 that we got the new server?
You're gonna ask me. I think right around there.
So it's old in computer.
When we were moving some computers around, is when he was taking a look at stuff and hooking stuff up and noticed, he's like, you're gonna need a server repair. And I said, what's that around? And he told me, and I said, when am I gonna have to do that? And he said, you can probably wait till your next fiscal year. I said, okay. So give me the price.
If we go to the cloud, are we gonna even need that backup setup?
Yeah,
You still need that
Yeah.
even though you're out on,
yeah, because that's all your files too.
well, isn't all your files on the,
For BSNA, but we have like working files too.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm kind of waiting for really our IT provider to go to the cloud, and I asked them about that when they were here during COVID, knowing that BSNA, and this is before we even had BSNA out, and I said to him, I'm like, when are we gonna go to the cloud? Because that would be so much easier. And they said, not really likely really soon with local government. And I mentioned the same thing to BSNA when they were here, because obviously they are transitioning to the cloud. Although they don't have a sunset on .NET, I want to be straightforward about that. They have not said, there's an end date for that, and confirm that with them. But it does have some really nice features. I think we were all pretty impressed with what they've done with the cloud system. But anyway, I was talking with BSNA reps about IT providers and local government, moving to the cloud, and they said, that's probably going to be a lot slower than it took to get, the BSNA to the cloud. And I think they said they'd been working on that, was it like 5 or 10 years or something? Anyway, other than that, it's pretty much standard in here. There's some small changes as far as, like I mentioned, some of our cleaning supplies are going to be provided by our cleaners now instead of in the supply line item, and so that's been adjusted. But all the utilities and the general contracts that we have with people for security and hall cleaning, documentation, HVAC, all of those things are pretty standard. Still planning on retaining Manor Casterison at this point. Talked with Sue and Tracy about that, and we feel like we have good service from Manor Casterison and then Raymond with the audit.
I kind of skipped over the receptionist. You want to fills in a little bit.
So I haven't filled that position. I haven't filled that position first because when Val retired, it was during COVID. And obviously, a lot of the walk-in traffic was yet to be seen on how that would be serviced. And as well, we have 4 full-time FTEs up in that front service area. So I didn't fill that to see, how that went. She's been gone a little over a year now, and I'm looking at filling that position so that we have, while I think they've been able to handle it during the transition, I think that that's a position that we'll need to replace. And again, I think you recall seeing a job description, and it's not a receptionist, it's expanded to some other additional capabilities with that as well.
Back to the BSNA upgrade, you said there's no sunset on the current system, right?
That's right.
So they're going to continue to support, this is an investment for some additional features and,
That's exactly right, and that is a choice, that this board, and I specifically mentioned that for that reason, that is not something that we have to do this year if the board chooses not to. I will tell you, I think that we felt it was a very good service and a nice platform. They are scheduling. When we saw them this summer, met with them, even if we had said we want to sign up for this, they're 9 months to 12 months before they can even come on site to do this. So scheduling this right now, we probably still will not have them on site until the middle of next year to implement it.
okay.
And it is, like you said, it's an investment we need to either choose to make or not to make.
So, I'm looking at the proposal here. Maybe I'm not following things right. You've got 34,000 in the budget for next year for the BSNA?
Well, I have that plus the annual amount is, where normally, let me pull out the proposal.
Page 4 of their proposal, they've got a total proposed of 50,000.
So if you look at page 5 of their proposal, you'll see $25,955.
Yep.
And that's the total annual service fees.
Okay.
And so that portion has been put in the budget. Let me go back to the page. Where we would normally put the annual service fees,
Okay.
which is 265, Department 265, this is page 20. 802009, it's description BSNA.
Yep.
It should probably be not a vendor name, but maybe some other, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's in at $34,000, and that $34,000 includes that $25,955.
Okay.
So if we were to choose not to do this, we would take this down, that 34 number down by about 16,000, because we would still need the 10,000 in annual fees for the .net. And then, let's see.
But I guess.
You see the payment schedule here, page
Yep.
4? So if you sum all of those up, which is like 60-some thousand dollars, if someone can do the math real quick there.
That's about right.
60-some thousand, and I emailed, the gentleman's name is Keegan, I believe, and said, okay, our total amount is the 3 payments total, but then included and embedded in that is the $25,955, correct? And he emailed back and said, yes, that is correct. So everything else, everything other than that $25,955 is put in the capital outlay expense item, which is the $35,595.
The 25,955 is the ongoing cost, right?
That's right.
Annual service fee.
Yep.
That gets, after 2 years, they can increase it by the CPI. Then there's hosting fees. Is that in addition? 5,400 down there at the bottom?
So it does, except it says hosting and data storage through Microsoft Azure to be billed annual for all modules included above. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not sure how that would impact and play into that. I just asked him about the 3 payments because that's our total amount.
Yeah, okay.
And made sure that it included the 25,955. And I can clarify that with him.
Yeah, it looks like it's included.
So they do have the hosting fee on top of it, correct?
No, included.
I guess maybe I read it wrong.
Well, it looks like it's included in the payment schedule. It's broken out as a separate line item in their proposal that would
Right.
be, so the actual annual, moving forward, the annual service cost would be the 25,955 plus the 5,400, and whatever escalation rate might be after year 2.
It's right here, so it's in here.
Oh, it is in there. Okay.
And right now, you said the service for the .NET is around 10,000?
It is. Yep.
So
And
with
if
the
I re-
hosting fee, you're not including the actual implementation cost, the ongoing service is an additional $20,000 a year moving forward.
15.
Well, if you include the hosting fee that you have to pay for, then it's about 20, a
Yeah.
little over 20.
Yep. I think, I'm trying to recall, when you guys switched to BSNA, it was quite an investment cost, wasn't it?
60,000. And that was for all of the different modules. At that time, we only had, I believe it was just assessing was on BSNA. The rest of them were all on fund balance, and we switched them all over and added a few more programs.
Right now, we have general ledger, accounts payable, payroll, cash receipts, tax, assessing, building. Yeah, so we have, I think we have 7 components, yeah. Did anyone have any initial thoughts on that, or still wanted to think about that BSNA proposal? We can also get any additional information from BSNA.
I think it's coming. When we had them up here, it was a rough time to be able to focus on it. It was prepping for the August election. I would love to see more jurisdictions jump on this first. I don't know that there's that many that have. I mean, it's going to happen, I know it is. It's just, and timing would be better for it to hit us in 2023 than it would in 2024.
Yep. True enough. Yeah, and I don't think, like you said, as far as like seeing how another jurisdiction utilizes it, I get that with like pictometry where we haven't used it, but this is the same,
Yeah, well, it was a little
Do we
bit
use-
different.
it was-
It had some different,
better.
well, yes, but
Yeah.
it's a learning curve.
Yeah, it will take some time, definitely. Like switching any software, for sure.
Is this going from like Windows XP to, or is this, totally relearning a new system?
No, I mean, the sense I got when we saw the demos was, it's like when you have a software that is just improved tremendously, there are still going to be, it's still functioning to get you to the same end place, but you're doing it more efficiently, better information, in an easier way. is probably the best way that I can explain it. So, can you do the same thing with .NET and still have your financial report? Yes, but you can do it better with easier information, payments, all of those things.
Can it be, because this is an ongoing cost, I mean, I get the upgrade, initial upgrade cost, these things are expensive, but the ongoing cost is pretty significant. Is there a way to sort of piecemeal these? Can you have some on the .NET and have some on the cloud? I mean, are there modules
They'll
that,
talk to each other if you're on
Okay.
two different systems.
Okay, so
Because
it's-
they all-
I also don't think it would be that easy for the user, because once you're used to their format,
Yeah.
you're kind of used to how that's presented,
Fair.
and the similarity between how you use it.
yeah. It'd just be nice to know, and y'all are the experts here, this is what y'all deal with every day, so would be looking for some recommendations, but just like to see a justification of annually $30,000 worth of value extracted out
Yeah.
of it,
And we can see if you'd like a presentation on it, we can see what they can do, maybe as a remote presentation. When I opened the proposal, definitely, I was a little bit queasy looking at that proposal, especially because I saw the value, and when we were talking about it during the presentation, we're like, well, how can we use it like this? You can do, certain things with it. And I was like, really got us starting to think about some other ways to use the software in a better manner. But then I go back to, after I saw the price and felt a little uneasy about it, I went back to thinking about, well, when did they get into BSNA? And yeah, it's an investment. And I remember at that time thinking it was quite expensive. And that is the way.
No, it's the way of the world, and everything's going to subscription-based and recurring costs, and everything's expensive. I get all that. It's just, it's a lot of ongoing cost, and once you sort of make that investment, there's not a whole lot of getting out of it.
It's not just the initial cost.
Yeah, it's the ongoing. And I guess the other thing I'd like to know, just because the numbers and the itemized costs they've got here some of these costs look really expensive. If you said there hadn't been a widespread acceptance of this locally.
Not within our Grand Traverse County.
It'd be nice to know what another proposal in another part of the state looked like for the same.
He did touch upon that and go over that and gave us some numbers for some other jurisdictions.
Okay.
They were comparable. I don't have those
They
with me.
flying people from Germany or something for the travel costs?
And the other thing too, my recollection is as well, and I'll confirm this with him, that when we talked with them the day that they made the presentation, that some of these costs are to be seen as far as how many days they're on site, how many days they're training. Do you remember him discussing that?
Vaguely. Again, I didn't get to sit in on all of it. I had to pick and choose what I could watch.
So, for
I thought that Some
example,
of it was still in the development stage too, because it was like you'd ask the question and there were still things that were evolving too. I mean, that's not travel related, but that some of the concepts were still in the development. It had not yet been fully flushed out.
I didn't recall that part, because they are having a number of municipalities use them, but it tends to be more downstate. What I was mentioning was on page 3, you'll see the number of days that they anticipate. And so those days you'll see up above, it'll say like $1,000 per day. So those things,
And I think that's a firm number, but how many days it needs
Right.
can be fluctuating.
Right.
Because we didn't need as many days between the clerk's office and the treasurer's office. We were able to cut those down with that conversion when we went from fund balance to BSNA.
what year was that?
Maybe 2008, 2009. I don't know, it's been a while. A long time. I did turn the heat up, Mindy, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
She's freezing too.
We can-
It's cold in here.
We can come back to this item.
Maybe if you could just reach out to him and send a blank carbon copy response back to us.
I'll just ask him those details, yeah, and see if if he's able to make a remote presentation or anything like that.
Yeah, sharpen his pencil on the proposal.
I tried that one.
Yeah.
That was my first attempt, yeah. Yeah, that didn't, they're pretty much, they're, I don't know how much they're selling so much as they're scheduling people in,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, I'd rather it be us learning it and getting it down pat in 2023 and not 2024. I don't
Yeah,
think.
that's fair. Okay.
Let's take a look on page 2022. You'll see the employee benefits. Just wanted to point out to you the,
There's a decrease in a medical, health, the dental.
dental, yeah, right.
What the
That
heck?
was pretty impressive.
Right. Medical at 4.83, I was happy to see that number because this happens every year, to be really honest. They tell you to expect between 7 and 11%, and it's usually, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't years that they have that, but more often than not, what we see is between that 4 and 6%. It is a decrease for dental and no change for vision. So those are all pretty much status in those, and we have accounted for, in like the HSA, the number of employees and transitioning those as well. We've covered 410, 411, and 412 with Claire. 446 is road projects, and this is pretty straightforward. This is $20,000 in brine. We're at about 18,000 this year, and then 15,000 for the Timber Hill SAD, and then 17,000 for the Holiday Woods SAD. Timber Hill, we obviously know that that's going through, and Holiday Woods, obviously, we haven't seen those public hearings yet. However, I will tell you, it was probably the most amicable HOA meeting I've ever seen with having a SAD presentation. So it was interesting.
The brine application, I can't remember. Wasn't it last season that we went with the Dow product?
About 8,000 of.
Okay. That
Yeah.
was a good feedback there?
Yeah, so actually, it was the year before was the first year we did that.
Okay.
And one of the things with that Dow product is that the more consistent years you use it, the better results you get. So, and I think that we are seeing that. I mean, I feel like I've gotten less complaints on brine issues or dirt roads this year.
I've seen it, because, Wilson Road is just south of us there, and traditionally in the summer, you'd always get a dust bowl rolling across there before they put on the second coat of brine. There was nothing, and we had that route in June, part of July. so-
There's something in the chemical composition that the more, it's either the more layers or the more it, wraps the road, I don't know. But the multiple applications enhance the product. So the first time you use it, you might not notice a huge difference, but by the third, fourth, sixth time you're using it, you're thinking that the product's working really well.
Yeah, at least the calls I've taken, probably 90% of them are the Vanderlip Dirt Road. Dust, rutting, those types of things. And I don't think it's a brine issue, it's the developer use and not maintaining
Yeah.
issue.
And actually, I don't even know how much it's that and how much it's just by nature of the construction. I mean, I know the developer was aware of it and worked with it with the contractor, and they even did an additional brine application, which they weren't required to do. But, then it becomes like, did they brine out far enough, and did they, and they coordinated that with the road commission. But you're just getting a tremendous amount of use on that with some heavy trucks
I think
during that
maybe 2 to 3
construction.
calls a week or walk-ins a week right now on them. And that's the road that they're complaining about.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we've gone over 621 and 622.
And the streetlights haven't really changed. We have moved more to LED light, that's 448. But the costs are still staying pretty similar, is that?
Well, no, I don't, I think, which page is that? Because I skipped ahead to the,
7? Looks like you moved it up 1,000.
yeah, just not knowing. No, actually, I left it the same because we've seen, I left it the same because we've seen costs pretty static there, so. And we have added, marginally, like what, 1 or 2 lights out there and really hasn't increased costs or anything.
Well, I think part of it is the LED.
It is, yeah. Let's see, the next department we're into is 751. The Parks Commission looked at their budget, which you'll see in here, standard meeting fees, additional meetings, parkland acquisition, while they have that, and this is one department where you will see, obviously, some budget amendments come back to you for this year, because obviously we had that acquisition that happened in July of 2022. The Parks Commission previously had committed verbally consensus amongst them that they wanted to take a look at putting $25,000 a year into an acquisition fund. And so that would be continued next year. They have 42 in different consulting, attorney, engineer, and grant fees, and you can see that detailed below. $12,000 for the staffing of the Parks Commission, $10,000 for the Park and Rec update. That does have to be done in order to continue to write grants through the state, and then 20 with the community garden. Let's see, what else have we got here? 25 for the Holiday Woodlands Natural Area, and that's a $10,000 potential maintenance contract. Don't really have the final amount on that. It was $5,500, I think, at one time, and actually, I don't know that we've ever even paid it. So I was like, well, if it was $5,500, it's certainly not going to be over 10, so I recommended putting 10 in there, and I don't know that they will use all of that. And $15,000 for planning and stakeholder engagement for Holiday Woodlands. Now, part of that 15 is offset in the revenue side with a $10,000 grant application. So we'll be putting in for a grant application for that, where we'll match $5,000 and look for grant amounts of $10,000. And that really will be for that Holiday Woodlands natural area to get some general stakeholder consensus and vision on that property. As you know, there's both hikers and mountain bikers out there, and apparently, not only in this area, but hikers and mountain bikers see things differently on trails, apparently.
Snowmobilers and bikers. I think different modes of transportation, they all have problems seeing eye to eye.
Yeah. Let's see. And with that, we have capital outlay of $10,000, which is, and I commend the Parks Commission for doing this. They have contracted with the Disability Network in our area for doing an audit of all the existing parks. As you know, as things get grant funding, we have to make them ADA accessible, right? But existing stuff isn't always necessarily. And so they're doing an audit of the parks to see where they can improve accessibility. So one area, I'll give you an example that we did just by chance, but probably would have been highlighted if it hadn't been done, was the pavilion at Grace McDonald Park had no sidewalk going to it for a long time. So when we did that parking lot project, we included that. We included the sidewalk going up to that, and that improves the accessibility there. And so we'll be looking for things like that coming out of that audit. And so the capital outlay has $10,000 to get them started on making some of those accessibility improvements. Yeah.
In the past, Parkland has sent a risk inspector out to all of the parks. Way back, Jerry Adair used to do it.
What, you're talking about putting in a grant to have an inspector go
Well,
up?
but he used to do that
They
as
used
part
to
of the
do it.
insurance.
I think they probably still do.
They still do.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that they go park by park. They do a general thing. They'll come and they'll talk with the ambulance. They'll come and they'll talk with the township, just about, like, the buildings and grounds. They'll go over and visit with Bob at the shop. And then they'll come back with some recommendations for that. But an accessibility audit for disabilities, no, they don't do that.
Yeah, because
Well,
Jerry
they,
did.
they will come out and go through the stuff to find out, they look for liabilities is what they're looking for.
Right, that's why
And
they
there's no
recommend
cost
the
for
one
that.
kind of bedding under the swings and that we have
Right,
to remove the
exactly.
slide and the merry-go-round.
Yeah. Luckily,
Those things.
I don't remember how much it is exactly, but luckily the Disability Network does it extremely reasonably. I think it's like $1,500 or $1,800 for them to do that and write a report on it. So,
So when I was on the Parks Commission, annually, we would go to each park as the commission. And that was the same time as when Parkland would go, so that everybody was out there and they were talking about it at the same time. So I would just suggest that we make sure that Parkland is being informed of those meetings so that everybody can be on the same page.
yeah, I've never known Parkland to go out with, in that time, even at that time, I've only seen them on a 4-year cycle. They usually visit on election year.
And they used to come every year and sit down in my office and go on the tour with the park commissioners.
Haven't seen that.
The representative passed away, and I'm not sure who had taken over, because I really haven't seen, I think I saw one representative since Jerry passed.
I don't know, Jerry.
Jerry Adair, he was the one that did it all for Parkland.
Yeah, I haven't seen any information like that from them or contact from any other personnel for that.
You know-
Didn't even know they did that, but we can certainly contact them to see if they will
We can
continue.
contact them and ask that they're, trying to think of the gentleman's name that would be one that comes up to this area.
They had one person leave who was the traditional guy who used to come that I knew of.
Yeah, they have the one that's responsible for a certain zone,
Yeah.
and I probably got his.
Is his last name Wood?
No.
Anyway,
Let's see.
I just think the more eyes you have on it, the more accessible and more safe.
yeah, actually, that improvement over at Grace McDonald was just a resident suggestion, which was great. Thought that was
Mike,
very astute.
I forget his name here. Mike Moran is the one that is in our area.
Is he still with them?
Huh?
Is he still with them? Parkland?
Was the last time I was there.
Okay.
You never know anymore.
Yeah,
but,
that's true.
What's the other one's name? His name is Mike too, and I haven't got his.
Well, Jen Benema could probably get that for us, couldn't she?
Yeah, you could contact Paul. You can contact him. In fact, Paul would probably, I'm trying to remember who all went through it, because I went through it and it rained. It rained so hard, we were soaked right through, but they found a lot of things that we needed to look at.
Well, that's when they ended up buying the first play structure, because everything had to be removed because it
Yeah.
wasn't compliant anymore.
Right.
And that was back under Grace's tenure.
Yeah, I wish I don't have the right book to have the cards with them.
That's okay. Well, I
I
can
got a picture.
email him.
Everybody.
No, they're all in my other booklet.
So that is what the 10,000 is there for, and the 30,000 is just general Grace McDonald Park improvements. $770 is building and grounds, and you'll see it's pretty much a standard status quo with some adjustments. just for time and cost of equipment. The capital outlay project that's there is ground cover at 10,000. And I don't have the estimate on that cost, but we'll be getting that.
Ground cover for where?
Grace McDonald underneath the two play structures.
Oh,
Yeah,
And it looks like you're looking to apply for a power plant grant?
Yeah.
Or part of that?
yeah.
Partnering?
Yeah, we passed the resolution in October and we'll send it out in November. And 10 was what was in would serve my memory the last time we looked at that area to that extent.
Do we need to look at additional for maintenance help? I know the situation this year was a little bit different, but there seems to be more and more maintenance to be done ongoing. Do we have enough in there for projected using more time for that, having that person use more time? I know this year it was different because we had a
Right.
primary guy out.
Right.
but-
No, I think we're pretty good in there. Obviously, we'll have some transition this year because we have a retirement coming up. So, there may be some transition coming to the
So that's
board
been-
with that
That's been some
Plus,
for the middle of the year next year. Probably the beginning of the season, actually. So we'll see how that goes, but what I decided to do was just kind of budget it as a status quo. Because that date could change.
quite a while ago.
Yeah.
found a picture.
Yeah,
what's the contract services?
Contract services are just, I had my computer here to pull up the detailed line item, and I can get you that, but that you'll find everything from, oh, gosh. Oh, contract services, if we have a tree removal, so when we had, I think like the oak wilt, that would have fallen under there, and that's,
Would it be the ongoing weed man and?
no,
That goes under landscape.
That's under 265, because it's specific to this building. That would tend to be more stuff that was, out in the parks. So, for example, if we had a contractor come in and,
I was just wondering if it was something specific, because we're
Well-
over this year.
because we had that's because we had the snow plowing in there. So our employee last year was on medical leave.
Oh, okay.
For 6 months. And so during that time was the snow season, and so we contracted that out.
Okay.
Yep. And that's why it's bumped back down, because that's not anticipated. Good question, though. And if you like, I can get you more detail on that, too.
All right.
Our insurance, you can see, is pretty standard cost. We did go out for RFP with that one, which is not the easiest.
For accident fund?
Yeah. For park plan?
This is our workman's comp insurance.
On 865? That includes our,
It's accident fund.
Yeah.
Out through parkland.
yeah. But we went out for RFP for park plan, it was about 3 years ago.
I guess I don't remember that.
Oh, you did some of
don't
the
remember.
background
Maybe
stuff
I
for
did.
it. Because it's kind of a pain to go through that. I was just talking with another township who had done that too. It's one of the RFPs that's not very much fun to do because the level of detail they require to bid that out is pretty significant. We have to go through all of that paperwork, and we did do that a couple years ago, and Parplan, which was our current provider, came through with a significant savings. I want to say it was like 17%.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
remember that.
And it was kind of like,
Why did we have to do this, to get you to
yeah.
sharpen your pencil?
Yeah, exactly. But that's what every other township has had to do too, so.
And the workman's comp part is based on the wages. It's just the additional
Right.
insurance that is in.
What did Park Plan, did they put the price in for this next year?
I don't know, I haven't seen anything.
I have not seen it for the next year, for 2023, no.
I was
Nope.
just curious what it did.
Nope. I can't remember, I want to say we get that invoice,
February?
I was thinking it was like first quarter into maybe the beginning of the
Oh,
second
so it's
quarter.
already after the budget's done.
Yeah, yeah. It's mid-year. The special projects, as I mentioned, that we're just continuing is Leah, Boardman River Project, fireworks. You can see those at the end of your budget, and then in Department 899. Looking forward to kind of getting those stratified a little bit different with that chart of accounts. So with that, there are a couple changes in there to make, so this will be tweaked a little bit, but you can see this year, and this always changes, because I try not to relish too much in this fact, because I know it changes a lot once, it can change some with the accountant getting us prepared for the audit. But we're looking at, right now, excess revenue over expenditures of over 200,000. And then for the 2023 requested budget, we're at about 110,000, where we have expenditures over revenues. We do have some significant large bulk projects in there that we won't traditionally have on an annual basis. So there's the 80,000 for trail engineering that I mentioned that we're looking for a grant for, but either way, we're going to have to complete it. And there's also that BSNA cost, not the annual portion, but the other cost, what was that, 35,000, yeah. So with that, I feel comfortable, even though that has an excess amount over. The one thing that I will tell you that I did not put in this budget, because I just think it's going to fluctuate a lot, and I want to see what it comes in at. And I'm happy to tell you the status, maybe I did already. The DNR trust fund for Arbutus, number 5, the plan specifications and bids that have to be approved were approved probably maybe about a month ago now. Just talked with Brian Souza about the process and bidding and what he finds the optimal timing. So he's looking at going to bid on that, if my memory serves me, January. So that whole project, the influx of the 300,000 from the DNR and the expenditure that will be our portion of the match and any overage of that is not in this budget, but what I would prefer to do is have some harder numbers to come back and just do a budget amendment. And remember that is coming out of fund balance. So, and with that, I do want to mention to you that one of the things we're taking a look at too internally, and to get this to you within the next probably 8 weeks, we want to pass that down. This is rough, so once you look at it, just wad it up and throw it in the trash, because it may very well likely not stay the same. But what you'll see is, and what you'll be interested right now in taking a look at a budget that has expenditures over revenues of 100,000, you'll want to say, well, what is our fund balance? So this gives you the fund balance right there. And then we're looking at, this hasn't been adjusted in some time, and as you know, there have been some projects that would have definitely come out of here. So say, for example, Grace McDonald Park improvements. We did some work with the parking lot there. So naturally, that could have been drawn down. It wasn't adjusted. And the reason why it wasn't adjusted is the years that we did the projects that could have hit these fund balances, we were able to absorb the costs just in through regular revenues. And so that's why it hasn't been adjusted. But we'll be taking a look at this for projects that'll have either impacted that current balance or board or commission directives through past motions, or just administration as we're taking a look at it, some recommendations. and then taking a look at that proposed balance and where that would fit. Now, the goal is, as you can see, the bottom of those two columns, the current balance and the proposed balance, are equal the same amount. So we're just looking at re-stratifying that. And that's something we really should be doing too with the budget process. I'm sorry, not the budget process. For the auditing purposes, the auditors will appreciate saying that between the designated and the different designations that they have for that. So that is something that we will be working on, but that will show you how we mitigate for the expenditures over the revenues. Any questions on that 101 budget? If you think of any, and you just didn't think of them at tonight's meeting, just didn't occur to you, feel free to give me a call. Happy to track down either of the historical information or the basis or rationale for the recommended 2023 fiscal year amount. And then the other funds that you'll see in the General Appropriations Act are pretty standard. You've seen the Metro budget, the police budget, the ambulance budget. I'm looking on page 5 of that General Appropriations Act. You've seen those. Some of the other funds, short-term rentals, public access, and the streetlights. And you've seen the streetlights, and the other two funds are relatively small. And the escrow is not really, the escrow is a really strange one. They require a budget for that, but it's not something you can easily budget. We talked with the auditor about that, and he just suggested last year a number, and we went with it, and we'll do the same thing again this year. Okay, I do want to, this will be really quick. So it's getting to be 9:15, and I want to, but I do want to just update you guys. Third on our agenda is the ARPA update. I didn't particularly put any packet material in here. I just wanted to verbally let you know the county applications are due October 31st. So we've been working on those. As you know, Carl Ferguson is working on them, and Claire and I are taking a look over them and offering any input or editing. So we'll be getting those together. And then I looked back to see where we were at with our ARPA funds, the township's ARPA funds, right? Because we can't forget that we received those too. And I looked back when we discussed this in the spring, and the timeline that we have here is that we would request, through early summer, request projects from the different departments. And so that really has been done by nature of getting ready for the Community Foundation listing that we submitted to and the county ARPA funding that we submitted to. That really put us in the mode of getting those departments to take a look at what projects and getting that information together. In the fall, we have, developed the list of expenditures for those projects. It's exactly what we're doing. And then we have, at the end of this year, December, gain public input on the categories of projects or potential outreach, survey, so forth. And then in the first quarter, making a decision with a facilitator on those. I think, if it makes sense to all of you, I think that this could easily be wrapped into that CIP process. I mean, it might as well be. If you're going through a very, very similar process, we can do that same thing when we do that. We did use, you'll recall there was a resolution where we claimed half of the funds part of the, you could claim up to 10 million in the, what's the word I'm looking for? What's that?
A single something, what did they call it, a single?
Not the single audit. The single audit, I know what you're thinking of. The single audit is if we end up spending more than $1 million in federal funds in a year. We'll likely escape that, knock on wood. But that's why we watch out for those things like with the TART grant. It was, I want to say automatic exemption, that's not it, where you could claim up to $10 million as lost revenue without any reason, rationale, explanation, or formula. And so what we had decided to do was to take half of that when I did the first reporting in April. The reporting is every April of every year. And so we took that amount in the first part of this year. So my suggestion would be is we just take the remaining amount, which will be the other part of the $1.2 million, and take that for the rest of 2022. I won't make that report until April, but I should know what we're going to do with that for the auditor's benefit.
So where does that show up in fund balance? It's not fund balance, or it is fund balance?
Right now, it's sitting in a different funding designation as, I don't know, I'd have to ask Steve the designation. I can't remember. It doesn't show up in that fund balance. It will eventually show up in that fund balance. We take that as lost revenue, and it eventually will.
Okay.
So I guess a couple things that I was looking for some input on, and one is, and I can bring back more information on it because I'm just forgetting the term of the automatic exemption for the up to 10 million. Anyway, the ability to do that for the remaining amount, we don't have to make that decision tonight. Like I said, the report's not filed till next April. And then also kind of utilizing the CIP process as something very similar to add that in, the 1.2 million into that process.
You're talking about using the capital improvement plan to align with projects that would be, ARPA money would be spent for?
Yes.
Our ARPA money?
Yes. So remember, technically, one of the nice things about taking that automatic allocation for lost revenue is that it no longer has to hit that 2026 mark. Not that we don't want to. I'm not saying you wait till, 2030 to spend it, but it doesn't have that deadline right in front of you, which sounds very far away, isn't very far away, especially when you're putting in for other grants. You don't necessarily want to go and spend it until you know if you might or might not get it elsewhere.
Does it decouple us from any of the federal strings that are attached
Yes.
to it as well?
Yes.
Reporting and compliance and all that kind of stuff?
And what you can spend it on, because now, instead of it hitting certain buckets, it now can be spent on anything that the township would normally spend funding on. So those are, things that, as well, things that benefit the public too. It could be, a parks project, it could be an infrastructure project, it could be road,
Well, I think, I don't necessarily, I guess I'd have to think about it a lot, and I don't necessarily hold this opinion, but I know a lot of people still probably hold opinions that the ARPA money could be spent on projects that wouldn't typically fall under a traditional capital improvement plan, so maybe my answer is yes and no to, I don't know, we'll probably need to get some more community feedback on what that might look like. If we were just, if ARPA was not on the table and we were putting together strictly a township capital improvement plan, it would be probably very pointed and specific, versus, hey, we've got this money to spend over here on maybe some I wants instead of I needs.
Yeah. I think one of the things I was thinking is that there's a distinction there, slight, but there's a distinction there. And what I was thinking is if we engage with someone as a consultant to take us through that CIP process, they could tangential or parallel process do the same thing at the same time, because you are talking a lot about a lot of similar issues.
Sure, yeah.
Question kind of off of that subject a little bit, but when I wonder, You know, we have capital improvements on all these different departments, but we don't have what they are, per se, where a bid sheet where somebody went out and got actual numbers, and we knew what they were gonna do. It's just like the money is put away in this, park improvement Killingsworth. What are we gonna do? What's the plan at Killingsworth that we
You gotta look
wanna
at the
put
rec
the money
plan.
into, huh?
Yeah.
Just look at the rec plan.
Yeah, and that's what it is, look at the rec plan, and it's a start. So for example, what do they have there at Killingsworth? 10,000, you know, they're probably, the one plan that I know that they have at Killingsworth is one, better trail signage, and two, a bathroom.
Okay, and I'm not asking for anything tonight, but what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that, you know, most of the time when I worked outside of government on budgets, and you had capital in there, you had to have a list of what you were gonna do and what estimate cost was. You might not do it that year, but at least you had something to tie the amount of money to that you're asking for.
Oh, and you're looking at that sheet thinking that
Well,
should
I'm
be-
just using this, but if you go through the budget, same thing.
So a couple things. One, the budget's not a capital plan. So the budget, eventually when we have that capital plan done, as I said, in concurrence with the RRC, that capital plan will feed into your budget. But it's not the full capital plan.
I'm not even basically talking about all that. I'm talking about the actual budget when we look at it. We got capital money in there, but it doesn't say specifically what they're gonna do with it.
It's a line item, and it has the amount, and then there's the detail.
But it doesn't have, I mean, where did the number come from? Where did the cost come from to put that in there is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I can show you some of that we can sit down and look with
Well, we
it.
should get it with budget when we look at the budget workshop.
In those footnotes.
It's in the footnotes.
Well, even if it's in footnotes, yeah, at least we know what the money they're looking at doing with it. You know, because, and that's gone on forever. That's why I'm saying, I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah.
It's just because when we approve $10,000, $25,000 capital, what are we gonna do with that money, and where does the figures come from that says it's gonna cost $25,000? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a gap where this capital improvement plan kind of fills that gap, right? We have a plan that sits over here that we can line up with each of these departments' categories and what that capital expense is going to be. There's going to be more detail in a capital plan, right?
Yeah, but even that will be plans and not specific bids. So
Sure.
your capital plan will just be, okay, overall, what are you looking to do? So say, for example, we take the master utility plan from the water and sewer, and what are the goals identified in there? Or we take the rec plan, what are the goals identified in there, and the master plan? And then those get fed into projects that'll get put into a capital improvement plan and ranked and stratified, and then you'll have estimates for those, but not necessarily definite bids, because that would be a tremendous amount of resource and time that would go into that. You do those then as you're doing them, and they get put into the budget. This right here is the fund balance. This isn't meant to be a
I
capital
know, I
improvement.
realize
This
that's
is
what
just,
this is.
okay.
That came to mind when I
Sure.
look at it. Improvement to Killingsworth, okay? Improvement to Pine Grove, but where is the plan that tells what they're gonna do with those improvements? What's the money building up for?
Yeah, and that, again, that goes back to, you take it from your rec plan, you take it from your master utility plan, your master plan, and get those projects, and this just starts to put away for those.
Or if the planner wants a gator so that they can go and do site plan. I mean, you want to know what that, if it's a $30,000 plan or line item, what is it? You know, a new car, a gator, or whatever the case might be.
new
Not
fire
just, not just $30,000. A hydroplane.
Okay.
I get what you're saying.
But one thing I want to make clear is everything that's a capital list in this budget, it is identified what that is. We don't just have like 30,000 for one thing. I do think there's one thing in parks where it's not clearly identified as much, and that's the 30,000 at Grace. But everything else that I can recall is identified, it's, you know, how much for this project or that project.
No, we don't have to spend any time on it tonight.
No, I'm just trying to find a good example of it for you.
But at the end of the day, we're going through a budgeting process, setting money aside for whatever these projects or expenses might be in the future, and then whatever those formal bids and contracts end up being, they come before the board again for actual approval. Like
That's right.
that's the time to scrutinize them, right?
That's right.
Yeah, we always, and future projects, probably a little bit different, but they should still be what they're for. I mean, if we're gonna build bathrooms at Killingsworth, what's the cost gonna be? You don't have to just the appropriate or approximate cost,
Yeah.
but at least we know that's what that money is set aside for.
So for example, like in your township hall, you have, you know, 970 is capital outlay, and it has $35,595 in there. You go down to the footnotes and it says, transition to cloud-based BSNA based on estimates of the 2022 BSNA proposal for 23 implementation. You know, the next one, capital major repair and replacement, I think, what do we have in there? 10,000? And you'll see in the footnotes, it says server replacement, estimate based on IT Right 2022 proposal. So that's where you get your detail. It's not just like 10 and 20 and 30,000 just kind of put in there. Like I said, I can only think of one where they haven't explicitly said exactly what the detail was for. That was the Grace for 30, but what I understand is it's for, you know, some park upgrades in there for the equipment, field supplies, that sort of thing. Or not field supplies, what am I trying to say? Basketball, you know,
Basketball court needs to be.
courts, fences, that kind of stuff. Soccer nets.
That's fine.
Back to ARPA.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a bit confused. I thought when we had that discussion back in the spring too, that this board was gonna get together and decide on possibly what our wants or our projects were gonna be. And, I don't hear that happening yet.
Well, I had, in this memo, obviously, board members, you know, we can do that, but this was requests coming out of Parks Commission, Planning Commission, East Bay Ambulance, Wade Trim's Master Utility Plan, Department of Public Works, you know, engaging with those departments and agencies to see what the projects may be.
Right, but part of that discussion we had, and then I was under the impression that we would get together and
Through a
Discuss.
facilitator.
Well, that's what she's talking
That's
about with
yeah.
the capital improvement plan, doing the capital improvement plan at the same time as we talk about all the projects that have been submitted, as well as the projects that the trustees want to see go forward.
Exactly, thank you.
Well, yeah, I know, but it just seems like it's a long ways down the road. We've already been talking about what the parks want, what they want, what this one wants, and then we should have had, my understanding is what I thought we were gonna do is get together and discuss whether, you know, maybe as a board, we wanna go down the road of broadband or a certain whatever, but, that hasn't happened, so.
I would think through that process with a facilitator, we would do that, as Mindy mentioned. You know, as we're looking at the department projects, obviously we can, you know, interject through that facilitator process. Do we want to look at this project or that project additionally?
The other thing that I was thinking of is that, you know, we talk about the capital improvement, we talk about the $1.2 million that we can, there's a whole lot less strings than what we originally thought was coming in. And do we want to proportion part of it towards those capital improvements that would normally be on a capital improvement plan, and what percentage do we want to have on the stuff that's, atypical, that we can go after. If this board wants to look at it as a percentage of the money to spend that way, or, what do we think that we can do that we can get some matching grant for, that we can really do something different and good for our community and that kind of thing.
And just what you're saying is that's one of the reasons I thought of doing it, as long as we're hiring a facilitator for the CIP, doing it along tangentially with that, because that process could happen in that way. The other thing we have to remember too is, we don't want to be too early, because one of the things we can do with this 1.2 million is use that to leverage other ARPA funding. And some of that hasn't hit the pikes yet. It will. But just for example, that sewer project where we're putting the intent to apply for, that's a year and a half long process. And so, for example, the county ARPA funding, right? We agreed at 50% on any of the projects, except for 2 that had different percentage amounts. We're not going to know that for a little bit. So for us to go and already plan for that money and then have to maybe backtrack, walk it back a little bit and say, oh, we need that for a matching fund for this ARPA grant or something. It leaves us a little more flexibility. And again, we're not tied to the hard 2026 number because of that. So if it's 6 months or a year this way or that way, it's not going to hit us hard doing that.
The only thing we're exposed to is obviously inflation costs, so that 1.2 million's
Absolutely.
worth a little bit less than it was when we got it.
Well, and that's the other point I wanted to make too on what Mindy said is $1.2 million is going to go very fast. And there are some significant, utility and I think recreation needs in the community in ways that, utilities it's an economic driver. And so not only one are you, say, for example, in sewer projects, and we're just writing about this today, are you, assuring the environmental safety of the community by making sure you have, good wastewater treatment, but also, parks were, so for example, during COVID, Bob was a little salty. He was still busy because they were being utilized a lot. And that's something that, that's one of the areas we can give back and utilize those funds. But remember, you've seen how expensive things are, so the 1.2 will go very fast.
Y'all didn't tape up all the play sets like they did in Detroit?
Yeah, no, we didn't. I think we had the bathrooms closed for like all of 1 week because we weren't sure what the heck was going on when stuff like officially, I think it was, what was that, March 23rd or something? And it closed down. I was like, what are we doing here? And then we're like, yeah, we gotta open these up. And yeah, it was a weird time for sure. Yep.
So we've got 3.6 million or so in fund balance. What is the rule of thumb on how much? Is it 4 million?
4 months,
4 months.
3 to 4 months.
And so even, places will differ. That's, I think, what the township has set. Some places will argue more. With local government, some people will even argue less, because the one thing that fund balance does for you is it guards against sharp fluctuations. So we have a really steady revenue base. You're not going to see it fluctuate a whole bunch. And so what that does is it leads to a lower, leaner fund balance. Now, having said that, we tend also to do projects. While our revenues might not fluctuate a lot, right? Our expenditures do, right? We're not going to build a $250,000 bathroom every year. We're not going to have a $120,000 election every year. It fluctuates a lot. So, so it's good to have that fund balance in there.
But I don't know what you're getting at, but I've said for a long time that we've allowed that to get a little bit beyond what should be accepted.
I agree with you.
If it's-
I agree with
We're
you.
talking $2-3 million, and it should be, even 50% of our budget in 6 months. That's only 500,000 around it used to be.
It's a million.
But I think what it should, but I think, when we're taking a look at that, I couldn't agree with you more. But I think what we should do is when we're deciding where to spend it, have it on some things just like ARPA is in a way, in that it's like not things that make us go on to continuing costs, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do about that. If you build a bathroom, the bathroom's going to need to be cleaned. But, I would prefer to draw that down some and have a bathroom at Killingsworth or have a sledding hill thing.
Redesign this building.
Whatever, I would prefer that the residents are able to enjoy those things. And again, during COVID, I see that recreational response was huge.
Well, and you've got that whole Pines Park that,
Right? We have Pines Park, there's also Hammond Park, and I know the Parks Commission is very interested in starting to do some planning in the Pines Park. I mean, you can see in the Parks Department budget, last year, this year, there's quite a bit going to planning, because it does take a lot of effort to get those projects together and off the ground, and to look for funding, to match funding. While we don't always have to match funding, it just extends our budget that much. Well, are you guys good to go? We'll make those noted changes and get any other information that we noted as well, and then bring back the more complete,
Are we ready for a public hearing?
it'll be in this format. Yeah, I think we can do that public hearing in November. Is everyone fine with that?
November 14th. Just because we need to notice it in the paper, that's why I'm asking, are we ready to do that?
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe we can spend the money to turn up the heat too.
Oh, no, that's not in the budget.
Well, I'll tell you after we're off. I've got to tell you about something I saw at Costco the other day.
That, the ARPA money, you said it was in a different fund. Do we have that money now?
Yeah, we do.
We do.
We do.
So is it earning interest?
Yes.
Okay. Something.
Yep.
It's not going back as fast as it should be.
It's not going back to the feds.
Yeah.
Backwards.
No, we've got all of that money then?
We do. We do. Is there any public comment? I don't think so, because we don't have any public. Joanne, you're pretty good there? Okay.
She's cold.
With that, what was our next meeting, November 14th?
November 14th.
Okay, we'll see everybody here November 14th. Have a good evening. Thanks for your attention and diligence tonight.